everyone, Novels Wonderland here. Thank you all for the love and support you've shown me and the channel.
What? I'm Guinevere. Fate. Chapter 156 to 175. Chapter 156, Chaldea has arrived. Mordred, are they still fighting? 24 hours had passed. The clanging of steel below New Camelot City had grown so steady it almost sounded rhythmic. A closer look at the supposedly exhausted combatants would reveal smiles on both their faces, clearly lost in the thrill of battle. On the city walls, Mordred was the only knight who had remained to watch the entire duel, reminiscing about the days she had trained under Guinevere. Just then, Lancelot brought her lunch. After a quick glance to confirm the dishes were decent, she nodded to him and leaped directly off the wall. A heavy thud echoed as dust billowed into the air, causing Guinevere and Gawain to momentarily halt their battle and turn to look. In their eyes, the short Mordred, clad in armor and wearing a horned helmet, slowly approached, carrying a lunch basket. As Mordred drew closer, her heart pounded faster, the urge to throw herself into her queen mother's arms becoming almost unbearable. But she was a big kid now, acting like a spoiled child would be too embarrassing. Besides, she hadn't figured out how to tell her story. She felt she had disappointed her father and queen mother, yet she couldn't bear to see the actual disappointment on their faces. Courage, fear, and a whirlwind of other emotions. When she was close enough, Mordred managed to steady herself. She looked at Guinevere, whose expression was just as complex, and said, "Other father, let's eat first. You can fight again after you've eaten." At that moment, Guinevere didn't yet know that the Mordred before her was her child. She sheathed her sword, took the lunch basket, and for a moment, didn't know how to respond. So she simply handed the basket to the equally hungry Gawain, and to Mordred's astonishment, pulled her into a tight embrace. "I'm sorry, Mordred." Guinevere's arms tightened around Mordred, their armor scraping together with a harsh kzzzt sound. Just as Mordred felt she had failed to live up to expectations, Guinevere and her Leah also harbored deep remorse toward her. Leaving the kingdom in her hands was one thing, that had been Mordred's own wish. But after she took the throne and led the kingdom into a golden age, Guinevere and Leah had begun traveling the world. By the time they returned to Great Britain in their old age, everything was already over. "Mordred, we're the ones who wronged you." Golden strands of hair brushed against Mordred's neck, and Guinevere unexpectedly felt the urge to cry. As she struggled to hold back, tears welled up in the corners of the eyes of this body she was using, the body that had originally belonged to Leah. A few seconds later, Guinevere realized what was happening. Having found some release for her emotions, she quickly let go of Mordred, turned away, and wiped the tears that had already streamed down her face. "Sorry, I lost my composure. This Camelot isn't like the one in Great Britain, the wind and sand are too strong here." In her past life, Mordred had never seen Guinevere cry. Hearing her apologize for the third time, she felt an overwhelming impulse to remove her helmet right then and there and confess that she was the one who should be sorry. But it was noon, and they were outside New Camelot City, hardly the right place for a mother and daughter to reconcile. Gawain and Lancelot saw Guinevere's expression, and their hearts churned with an indescribable mix of emotions. "Miss Ruler, why don't you join us? Please stop talking about destroying your other self. That's impossible." Wiping away her tears, Guinevere felt her spirits lift. She bounced on the spot, preparing herself for a combined assault from Gawain and Mordred. Though she could tell Mordred had no will to fight. Her back was turned, and her shoulders trembled as if she were genuinely sobbing. Are you okay? I understand your father never held you, but you don't need to be this emotional about it, do you?" The moment Guinevere finished speaking, Mordred spun around. Guinevere felt a fierce glare pierce her. Then, without another word, Mordred turned and headed back to the city. But her heart was now set on helping Guinevere. For now, however, her blessing was more of a hindrance. "Miss Ruler, you should eat first. These are rations mash and the others brought from Chaldea." Outside the city gates, Gawain was already eating. Guinevere, who had taken a nap in a tent and was now wide awake, was handing her the food. Hearing Guinevere mention Chaldea, and seeing his awkward expression, Guinevere turned around. She saw that the three from Chaldea had indeed arrived, and were cooking with the refugees who had gathered nearby. Some refugees came because they were unaware of the holy selection, others came despite knowing about it. Outside New Camelot, life in the other regions of this singularity, aside from the desert ruled by the Sun King, was growing harder by the day. Even for a 1 in 1,000 chance, many were willing to gamble on being the lucky ones. Guinevere turned away, not taking the food Guinevere offered. Instead, she suggested, if you have a moment, why don't you try talking to Gawain? Ask him if he's still meant to be the executioner. Before Guinevere could even reach the Chaldea trio, a fierce argument erupted between Gawain and Guinevere. Though Guinevere knew he was no match, he drew his sword on Gawain, who had barely taken 2 bites of his meal. The clash of steel rang out. Guinevere was quickly forced onto the defensive, but fortunately, Gawain's guilt held him back. He couldn't bring himself to strike a killing blow. Hey, Guinevere called out to the Chaldea members. How did you all get here so fast? The Sun King provided us with a massive amount of materials, and Da Vinci-chan built us a vehicle, Mash explained. Speaking of which, aren't you their king too? Didn't a single one of them want to follow you? Mash had lived in Chaldea since her creation. As an artificial human, she didn't quite grasp the nuances of human social etiquette and often spoke with a blunt, unintentionally sharp tongue. See? Guinevere was stunned speechless by her words, overcome with the urge to pull Mash over her knee and spank her soundly. And so, Guinevere actually did it. She ambushed Mash, pinning her down and delivering a firm slap to the unarmored curve of her backside. Leaving a clear handprint, Guinevere felt instantly refreshed. What are you looking at? She declared, turning to the orange-haired girl. Even if Mash doesn't know the true name of the servant she's channeling, she should at least know she's borrowing the power of a knight of Camelot, right? As the king of Camelot, what's wrong with me punishing a knight who spoke disrespectfully to her king? If you're so bothered, orange-haired girl, you can go ahead and slap Mash's butt yourself. After fighting for 24 hours straight, Guinevere's muscles still ached as she sat down. Her body's endurance stat wasn't high, she had pushed through mainly by losing herself in the battle, becoming oblivious to fatigue. Gawain, without the cover of night, was invulnerable. Guinevere could suppress him with her sword skills, but in a normal state, she couldn't truly defeat him. The reason she hadn't unleashed her second noble phantasm. That was Guinevere's personal indulgence. Having finally reunited with them, even if they weren't the versions from her world, she couldn't bear to fight them to the death right after meeting them again. They still had some time. Whoa, you actually went and slapped Mash's butt. Shortly after Guinevere sat down, the girl named Ritsuka sprang into action. She lunged at Mash, trying to cover Guinevere's handprint with her own. They had arrived too late. They hadn't witnessed the aftermath of yesterday's holy selection, the fields of corpses already cleared away by the enforcement knights. If they had, they certainly wouldn't be in the mood for such antics. But judging by the sky, today's holy selection was fast approaching. Hey, listen up, Guinevere said, her tone suddenly serious. I need your help. I'm planning a surprise attack on the Lion King. If it could be written on her status sheet, Guinevere would undoubtedly have a special attack bonus against the Round Table Knights. But she wasn't arrogant enough to charge the Lion King head-on, with just Guinevere while Gawain and the others were watching. Now, with Mash and Da Vinci-chan, 2 more servants on their side, Guinevere felt they might just have a chance. Chapter 157, The Pact with Ritsuka. 1,286 words. Get out of here. You'll all die. Hurry and leave, mister. The Lion King will kill anyone who fails the holy selection. Ma'am, your daughter is so young. You absolutely cannot take her there. The world was cruel, and a singularity on the brink of collapse was even more so. Guinevere knew that for the refugees who had come this far, leaving meant waiting for death. Staying was their only sliver of hope. Just as they were doing now, the refugees had chosen to come here. They had heard rumors and were at least somewhat prepared mentally. They wouldn't be easily swayed by well-intentioned warnings from strangers. Minutes earlier, after Guinevere had explained why the Lion King would soon appear, the three from Chaldea had begun trying to persuade the crowd, but with little success. A short while later, Guinevere was defeated and forced to retreat from Gawain. Ignoring the lingering golden flames and sword-scarred earth of the battlefield, a large mob of refugees swarmed the now unoccupied Gawain. "Sir Knight, please have mercy. My daughter is only 5. Don't make her go through the holy selection. Sir Knight, what about me? Take me inside. I can warm your bed. Young Master Knight, we know many of you like cute boys. My younger brother is available." The scene was chaotic and noisy. Thanks to the efforts of the three from Chaldea, even those who had been unaware of the holy selection now knew what it was. Yet, the result wasn't their departure. Instead, they grew even more fervent toward Gawain, desperately trying to sell themselves for a chance at survival. Surrounded, Gawain retreated without a word. He would wait until the Lion King conducted the holy selection on schedule, then reappear to clean up. Before he left, however, he cast an extra glance toward Guinevere, understanding that another fierce battle was imminent. "Miss Ruler, is there really no way to save them? Even if we convinced them all to come with us, could you feed so many people, Miss Ritsuka? You came from the desert, didn't you? You saw those half-gullified people. Could you save them all too? Let me be clear, when they surrounded me, I killed every single attacker. No matter how much of a knight the King of Knights is, she is still a king who has dominated battlefields." Because of Guinevere's sword, Chaldea harbored doubts about her claimed identity. But since they couldn't guess her true name, they continued to treat her as the King of Knights for the time being. "Miss Ruler, I just had Mash knock them unconscious." The orange-haired Ritsuka was, after all, no chaotic evil. She was just an ordinary high school student. Even after enduring several singularities, she still held on to the modern sense of morality instilled by her education, valuing human life above all else. To Guinevere, Ritsuka's words sounded a bit naive, but it was far more reassuring than hearing her say, she had slaughtered all those people. After all, Guinevere had come on this mission to support them. In her mind, she still saw Chaldea's group as the protagonists, and she didn't mind seriously considering young Ritsuka's request at this moment. "Miss Ruler, if you were to kill the Lion King later, would the holy selection end? Could you let us provide you with more support? For example, you could form a contract with me first." Ritsuka herself lacked strength, her magecraft skills still at a novice level. But she had Da Vinci-chan by her side and Dr. Romani providing real-time communication from behind the scenes. Setting aside everything else, Da Vinci-chan alone could discern that Guinevere hadn't been summoned by the Singularity's Holy Grail, and currently had no master. From this perspective, if an uncontracted Guinevere could fight Gawain under the sun to a standstill, what if she had a master and all her stats were boosted? Could a surprise attack on the Lion King truly succeed? Listening to Ritsuka's request and her reasoning, Guinevere couldn't help but tilt her head. To her existing impressions of Ritsuka as lewd and kind, she now added clever, decisive, and willing to swallow her pride. So should I agree? If she agreed, Guinevere's true name would be revealed. She had only used Leah's identity to avoid a lengthy explanation. Hadn't she already told Tristan? Tristan was different in Guinevere's eyes, she wouldn't find it a bother to tell him. "Miss Ritsuka, I agree to form a contract with you for mutual support. But as the price for this contract, I think perhaps you should." As she spoke, Guinevere recalled Ishtar in the next singularity, who had demanded Chaldea's master kiss her feet when they formed their partnership. You like girls, don't you?" "Yes. I love girls of all personalities." "All right then, I won't reward you myself, my Leah would get angry." "Young Ritsuka, how about you kiss Mash? Give her one kiss, and I'll become your servant." "Eh? Miss Ruler. Why are you dragging me into this? So many people are watching, and on the city walls there's. Mash trailed off, unable to continue. On the walls stood Mordred and Lancelot. In her eyes, Mordred only stirred a flicker of anger. But the sight of Lancelot made black mud seem to churn within her heart, filling her with an overwhelming urge to smash him with the hardest shield bash she could muster. However, she didn't want to endure such a humiliating act in front of the knight in purple-black armor. But before she could refuse, Ritsuka pulled her into a forceful embrace and planted a swift, hard kiss on her forehead. Oof, that hurt. But a kiss on the lips would have been even better. Frustration and despair welled up inside her, fueling a resentment toward the person before her. She felt a sudden urge to smash her shield into Ritsuka's face. Startled by her own thought, Mash noticed the look of utter shock that crossed Ritsuka's face the moment she formed the contract with Guinevere. Just keep calling me Miss Ruler. As a master, Ritsuka could view a servant's status. Even without seeing the true name, she could deduce a great deal from the noble phantasm's description. The description for Guinevere's Sword of Destined Judgment clearly stated it was the companion sword to the King of Knights' Sword of Promised Victory. The King of Knights' companion could only be. I understand, Miss Ruler, young Ritsuka said, her surprise replaced by solemn resolve. Thank you for coming to our aid. Chaldea will lend you our full support in your quest to personally correct the Lion King. Although she was a novice mage, Ritsuka possessed exceptional aptitude. Her skills were heavily skewed toward support magecraft for servants. For instance, she immediately cast healing magecraft on Guinevere to alleviate her physical fatigue. Then, she followed up with reinforcement magecraft, further boosting all of Guinevere's base parameters. Even with this enhancement, however, Guinevere's stats still fell short of what they had been when summoned by Merlin, a grand caster. Ha! Guinevere stretched her limbs, letting out a long breath as she adjusted to her newly enhanced parameters. Finally, the day's holy selection arrived, and the Lion King once again appeared on the city walls. But after the Lion King's appearance, Mordred inexplicably withdrew. Agravain and the self-disfigured Tristan, who had been present yesterday, were nowhere to be seen. Frowning, Guinevere began to suspect a trap. Then she saw the Lion King giving orders to Lancelot at her side. Moments later, Lancelot leaped from the walls and, joined by the reappearing Gawain, advanced toward Guinevere. Miss Ruler, Lancelot announced, the king has commanded us to ensure you meet your end here. Chapter 158, Ruler, unleash your noble phantasm. 1,370 words. When planning the surprise attack on the Lion King, Guinevere had hoped Gawain and the others would hold back, allowing Bedivere, Mash, and Da Vinci-chan to tie up an equal number of Round Table knights. But if their opponents fought seriously, even if only Gawain and Lancelot attacked, Bedivere's group of 3 wouldn't be able to hold them off for long. Bedivere was weak, at least among the Round Table knights. Even with his silver arm, he couldn't defeat any of the 12 Round Table knights. And Mash? She still didn't know the true name of the servant who had granted her power, limiting her output. In game terms, her break power was insufficient, and her stats were too low. Da Vinci-chan. She wasn't a combat-type servant. In a one-on-one fight, she couldn't even handle a single sphinx. Just as expected, when Gawain and Lancelot joined forces, the well-rested Bedivere charged forward to meet them. He was instantly sent flying by a single strike from Gawain, his ordinary knight's sword shattering into 2 pieces. Gawain had truly held back just now. Mash, too, was knocked away by a single sword strike from Lancelot. Afterward, Lancelot's gaze fixed on Guinevere. He hadn't even recognized the one he'd just sent flying as his daughter. Da Vinci-chan began providing support to Bedivere. At Guinevere's signal, Mash suppressed the rage boiling within her and rushed to Bedivere's side. She still didn't understand the source of her own fury. I miscalculated. The power balance between our sides doesn't support a direct confrontation with the Lion King yet. As Lancelot closed in, Guinevere gripped her sword with resolve. On the city walls, the Lion King had already begun the holy selection. Among the 1,000 refugees, only 2 were bathed in brilliant golden light, signifying they had been chosen. Enforcement knights began to appear in the city. The refugees, knowing the consequences of not being chosen, started to flee. After their fragile hope was shattered, some refugees still cherished the chance to live even a few more days, despite knowing escape would only grant them a brief reprieve. Blood, screams, and mournful cries filled the air as the enforcement knights moved like puppets, following the Lion King's orders. Having traveled with Tristan and his enforcement knights, Guinevere knew they were still alive, still possessed their own thoughts. And yet, they had chosen to abandon their knightly honor, all for the sake of the loyalty they had sworn to the Lion King. Leah, this version of you truly no longer deserves the title of King of Knights. You've become the very tyrant you despised. Now only 3 meters from Lancelot, Guinevere's muttered words reached his ears. Lancelot frowned but remained silent, unable to defend the Lion King. He knew the king's ideals, her nobility, her desire to guide humanity through the apocalypse. But he couldn't deny that the king treated human lives as disposable, completely violating their knightly oaths. Lancelot, are you really going to attack the fleeing elderly, women, and children? Lancelot lowered his head in shame, but when he looked up again he spoke. Miss Ruler, if you don't want me to violate my knightly code any further, then do your best to stop me. Fighting you doesn't violate any knightly principles, and you are not my lord. Lancelot actually knew Guinevere's true name. But for him, a man from the correct timeline, Guinevere represented his greatest mistake, especially this Guinevere, who wore the face of the King of Knights. Every time their eyes met, his heart twisted in agony. The longer he looked at her, the more his sanity threatened to shatter. After speaking, he deliberately closed his eyes, calmly awaiting Guinevere's attack. He was supremely confident in his martial prowess. He didn't know that, in terms of pure swordsmanship, the Guinevere before him was slightly superior, and could quickly force him onto the defensive. Mash, hold off Sir Gawain on your own. Bedivere, Da Vinci-chan, go stop the enforcement knights. Those refugees want to live, so let's save them. We need to retreat. Young Ritsuka, I'm sorry. The opportunity to ambush the Lion King is gone. Guinevere didn't actually need to apologize to Ritsuka. Ritsuka had wanted to say the same thing, but had hesitated, worried about endangering Guinevere, Mash, and the others. She wanted to save the refugees, but she didn't want to put her own team at risk to do it. Clang! Guinevere's sword clashed with Lancelot's. In that single, careless moment, Lancelot's gauntlet was shattered, and he nearly lost 2 fingers. Such an injury would have guaranteed his defeat. But at the last critical instant, his skill, Eternal Arms Mastery, activated, allowing him to evade the humiliating fate of a one-strike loss. After that close call, Lancelot became completely serious, once again displaying his flawless swordsmanship. Mash. Senpai. I know. Leave it to me. I'll hold him off with everything I've got. Their exchange happened in a flash. Only 10 seconds had passed since the enforcement knights began their slaughter. As Mash desperately held her ground, Bedivere and Da Vinci-chan began intercepting the enforcement knights, allowing more refugees to survive and flee toward the wilderness far from New Camelot. But just then, Tristan appeared from the side, leading a small contingent of enforcement knights. He had emerged from a side gate, crashing directly into the stream of fleeing people. His noble phantasm was a harpbow, his arrows sound itself. Tristan was a knight who excelled at wide-area slaughter. With just a single note from his harpbow, dozens of refugees were decapitated. His killing efficiency was terrifyingly high. At this moment, his eyes were closed, his face expressionless, his heart filled with shame. But because of the Lion King's blessing and his loyalty to her, he could only pluck the strings with an expression overflowing with sorrow, playing a dirge steeped in profound grief. Could Guinevere stop him? Though her martial skill surpassed Lancelot's, her base stats were still inferior to his current state. Defeating him would not be a quick affair. Mash. Bedivere? Da Vinci-chan. Mash was barely holding on, relying entirely on her shield. Her internal organs were already damaged from the concussive force. This was despite Gawain recognizing her shield, and while claiming to fight at full strength, only focusing his attacks on the shield itself. He didn't even try to maneuver around it, as if he'd become obsessed with striking it. Guinevere and Da Vinci-chan. The Lion King's enforcement knights were far from weak. They were battle-hardened heroic spirit knights who wielded mana. Faced with their numbers, Guinevere and Da Vinci-chan, neither of whom were primarily combatants, could do little more than delay them. At this rate, standing just behind Guinevere, only Ritsuka had a full view of the battlefield. She saw the Lion King turn and depart once more. She saw what looked like a fire breaking out somewhere within New Camelot. At the same time, she noticed the battle turning against them, and that something was happening near Sir Tristan. Suddenly, several dozen black-robed, skull-faced assassins appeared. 99% of these assassins were the 100 faces they had repelled before. The only exception was the Hassan of Intoxicated Smoke, whom they had encountered on their way here. At that time, the Hassan of Intoxicated Smoke was escorting hundreds of refugees to a safe location. She had mistaken Mash for a knight of New Camelot, leading to a fight between them. By the power of a command spell, I order you, ruler. Unleash your noble phantasm. This command spell was issued by Guinevere through their master-servant contract. She needed to instantly replenish her mana to create an opening in the current stalemate. She had also noticed the Lion King's departure, and the unnatural fire raging within New Camelot City. This was something that had never happened in her memories. A moment's thought about the fire's cause led Guinevere straight to Mordred. If not her, it couldn't possibly be Agravain, right? He's the king's most fanatical supporter, agreeing with everything the king does. Lancelot, are you ready to receive this blow? Under the command spell's effect, Guinevere's mana was fully restored. Her sword began to glow with a crimson, raging light. Chapter 159, Chapter 159, Mash, Father. 1404 words. Lancelot. As the crimson, berserk mana erupted, and Guinevere's holy sword, enveloped in mana, seemed to stretch 10 meters long, Gawain cried out in alarm. Mash struggled even harder to restrain him. Having witnessed the release of the Sword of Promised Victory countless times before, Lancelot was forced to open his eyes by the overwhelming mana. He fell into a daze once more, as if he were seeing the King of Knights from the past. As Guinevere raised her holy sword high, her stance for unleashing its power was identical to the King of Knights, only the color of her mana differed. I'll die. Lancelot thought. If I take this head on. Should I flee? Guinevere's gaze had already locked onto him. Unless he fled toward the crowd of refugees, the beam of light would surely follow. Yet, a sliver of knightly pride held him back. Should I charge forward and attack while she's gathering power? Guinevere had already created a 30-meter gap before beginning her noble phantasm's release. He knew that if he charged, her sword would descend upon him mid-stride. He would still be taking the noble phantasm head-on. So, ruler, show me the power of your noble phantasm. Only half a second passed between Guinevere raising her holy sword and Lancelot completing his thoughts. As Lancelot roared, he too raised his holy sword. Its name was Arondite, the sister sword to the Sword of Promised Victory, and thus a sibling blade to the holy sword in Guinevere's hand. This sword is sworn to my king. This sword carries my deepest emotions. And this battle will forge the future I share with my king. Reach the end. Surpass the limit. Now, answer me. Unleash the brilliance that rivals the holy sword of the planet. King of another world, witness this light. Shine forth, sword of destined judgment. Arondite overload. Lancelot unleashed his noble phantasm a second after Guinevere. Just as the crimson beam of light reached him, he swung his fully released holy sword downward. Guinevere's beam of light was, without question, an anti-fortress noble phantasm on par with Excalibur and Lancelot's holy sword. It was an anti-army noble phantasm of the same rank. When he unleashed the holy sword, overloading it, immense light mana gathered within its blade. Normally, this would manifest as a blue beam of mana. But now, he held the sword's mana in check, preparing to sever Guinevere's light beam. He was betting his life on this single strike, a slash that embodied his entire understanding of swordsmanship. The azure light of Arondite descended slowly, as if painting across space, or welding it like a steel plate. Regardless of the metaphor, Lancelot's sword tore through Guinevere's light beam, forcing the crimson mana to surge outward to both sides. However, their battlefield was directly before the gates of New Camelot. The enforcement knights pouring from the city had already split to flank them, avoiding the clash of their blades. The severed light beam fell upon the divided ranks of enforcement knights, slicing through their formations, before erupting into two pillars of light that soared into the sky. That her noble phantasm release had been severed didn't surprise Guinevere. She knew the Knights of the Round Table even better than the King of Knights herself. "Sir Lancelot," she called out, "thank you for your assistance." The clash of noble phantasms ended. Guinevere and Lancelot were catching their breath, but after just one deep inhale, Guinevere burst out laughing. Her body began to glow with mana, as young Ritsuka used her second command spell. "Ruler, go to Tristan's side." Tristan had been blocking the refugees' escape route. He was ambushed by 100 Faces and Hassan of Intoxicated Smoke, but neither of these assassins was a particularly powerful servant. 100 Faces sacrificed their life to buy time, and Intoxicated Smoke unleashed his noble phantasm, yet they could only delay Tristan for a few seconds. But those few seconds were enough for Guinevere to complete her noble phantasm clash with Lancelot, temporarily cutting off any enforcement knights from leaving the city to provide support. Fueled by the command spell's power, Guinevere crossed 300 meters in the blink of an eye. "My apologies, Sir Tristan. I should have made you withdraw sooner. Rest easy. If we have the chance, I'll finish the story I left untold." The teleportation was completely unexpected, and Guinevere's sword strike was impossible for Tristan to defend against. Their bodies crossed paths, and with a single, decisive slash, Guinevere stood holding Tristan's head, apologizing earnestly. She had apologized far too many times today. But this apology was exceptionally effective. Hearing her words, Tristan opened his now eyeless sockets, as if he could still see her. In his final moments, as he began to dissolve into light, Tristan smiled. He had fulfilled his duty to the Lion King, and he no longer had to endure the constant torment of his knightly code. As for whether Guinevere could succeed in her correction, or if the Lion King could achieve her wish, that was a matter between them as partners. It was best for an outsider like him not to dwell on it. If Guinevere herself were to raise the banner of rebellion against the Lion King, Tristan would find no will within himself to stop her. "My queen," he said, "it is I who should thank you. To leave this world early, this is truly what I have longed for." Guinevere couldn't be sure if Tristan truly saw her, but he had clearly guessed her identity. His gratitude also eased the psychological burden of striking down a guardian knight. "You." In just a few seconds, Tristan's bow had eliminated over 20 of the 100 Faces, and severed both of Hassan of Intoxicated Smoke's arms. This was the true measure of Tristan's prowess in group combat. With a few more seconds, he could have annihilated the remaining 100 Faces, gravely wounded Intoxicated Smoke, and continued his slaughter, all while his heart bled. From this perspective, Guinevere's decision to let him withdraw was indeed a release. But while Tristan found his release, the psychological torment for Gawain and the others, who had yet to find theirs, would only intensify. As the grim-faced Agravain stood on the city walls and reiterated the royal decree, Gawain sighed. Lancelot, too, had no choice but to charge toward the temporarily unprotected Ritsuka. "By my command spell, I order you, ruler, come to my side." Chaldea's command spells were capped at 3 charges, but they replenished daily. As long as they were used only when absolutely necessary, no one would begrudge their use. Clang! Guinevere's sword clashed with Lancelot's once more. Both staggered back 2 steps before lunging at each other again. Ritsuka, take the refugees and run. Mash and I will hold the rear. If she can't hold out any longer, I'll tell her the true name of the servant who granted her power. Though sent flying by Lancelot's strike and accumulating internal injuries with every blow from Gawain, Mash stood her ground. She appeared fragile, yet she possessed incredible resilience. This battle alone was enough for Guinevere to recognize her worth. At the same time, Guinevere looked forward to Mash's growth, hoping she would figure out the answer that was practically laid bare before her. A shield familiar to all the Round Table Knights, armor identical to theirs, the servant who granted her power could only be one of the Round Table Knights. In this singularity, Mash had already encountered several Round Table Knights. By eliminating them, and then using historical legends to rule out more candidates, that would only leave. I just figured it out. Mash exclaimed. The one who gave me power is Galahad, and the person fighting you is my father, right? Dad? Was Mash truly that airhead? The single word Dad, uttered while she caught her breath, caused Lancelot's body to freeze instantly. A rondite slipped from his unsteady grasp and clattered to the ground. If Guinevere had been willing to fight dirty, she could have eliminated Lancelot right then and there. But thanks to her memories of her past life, she knew that Mash's cry of Dad was the best chance to bring Lancelot over to their side. Though Lancelot was a notorious philanderer, he was undeniably a doting father. And his loyalty to the King of Knights. It was a flexible loyalty, with many things taking precedence over it. Chapter 160, all because of the Lion King's favor. 1,374 words. They had successfully escaped. After Mash's words left Lancelot stunned, New Camelot sent no more knights in pursuit, perhaps due to Guinevere's presence, or perhaps because of Tristan's death. Did the Lion King know that sending a single Round Table Knight would be a suicide mission, or was it something else? Within New Camelot City, in the inner city throne room, all the Round Table Knights had gathered. They were mourning Tristan's death, requesting half a day of rest to honor his memory while awaiting the king's judgment on Gawain and Lancelot for failing to complete their orders. Mordred, was that really your mother? The Guinevere from another world? Sir Gawain, how many times are you going to ask that? Is it really so surprising that my mother could overpower both you and Lancelot? Just know this, in my world, my mother is the strongest Round Table Knight. Mordred reeked of smoke and fire. Though she denied starting the fires in the city, every knight present knew the truth. After confirming that the woman was indeed Guinevere, Gawain turned to Lancelot with another question. It wasn't just Guinevere. The one who called you Dad was Galahad, wasn't it? Lancelot, you. Hey. Mordred cut in. Let me make one thing clear, my mother and Lancelot never had an affair. She's only interested in women. Lancelot was cut off before he could speak, but upon hearing Mordred's words, he let out a deep sigh of relief. His affair with Guinevere had been a thorn in his heart, his greatest regret even after death. It had made him believe his most fitting class should have been a berserker, like a rabid dog. His long-held wish had always been to be punished by the king. But in this singularity, the king had commanded them to assist and serve, and he had been summoned as a saber. Mordred, Lancelot said, thank you for that information. I'm very happy to hear it. TCH. Mordred clicked her tongue and said no more. She was, after all, a knight of the next generation, and had received a proper education. She knew it was improper to gossip about her elders' romantic affairs. But with her silence, it was Agravain from the proper human history who spoke up. Lancelot, you shouldn't have been here these past 2 days. When the king summoned you back, it wasn't to let you go easy on the enemy and defy orders. Sir Agravain, I truly didn't hold back. Gain, know that Miss Ruler is genuinely that powerful. Lancelot paused, then continued, seeing Agravain's unrelenting glare. But if you're referring to Galahad calling me Dad, you should know I would inevitably react that way. In my lifetime, he never once called me that. Sir Agravain, you're still holding a grudge, aren't you? After all, I'm the one who killed you with my own hands. With his black helmet, black hair, and a face as dark as thunder, Agravain had returned to serve the king once more. He had intended to set aside the circumstances of his death, but Lancelot had just forced him to remember. Ha! You betrayed your king, your wife, and your son. And when Gawain's plea for aid finally reached you, you couldn't even make it to Camlin Hill in time. You're nothing but a failure who spent the rest of his life drowning in regret. I'll ask you just one thing, will you betray the king again for Guinevere and Galahad? Agravain's right hand rested on the hilt of his sword, his suspicion undisguised. He had died exposing Lancelot's affair with Guinevere, and Lancelot was the man who had taken his life. But what truly mattered to him was Lancelot's betrayal of the king. I've said it before, I will serve the king faithfully to the very end. In truth, if Agravain hadn't brought it up, Lancelot had been considering seeking out Galahad. But now that the possibility had been laid bare, he was trapped. Betray the king again to help his daughter, or continue serving the king to atone for his posthumous regrets. The two choices balanced precariously on a scale. The slightest push in either direction could tip Lancelot's decision. Compared to the story Guinevere remembered, Mash had called him Dad far too early. The location and circumstances were completely wrong, and Mash's follow-up attack after the word was missing. This meant Lancelot had already been swayed by Agravain's verbal assault, forcing him to make a choice different from what he might have otherwise. Then, Mordred, will you leave? The Father King here is not your Father King, but the Queen Mother there truly is your Queen Mother. Everything Agravain did was for the king's sake. Compared to Lancelot, Mordred's betrayal had directly led to the king's death, making Agravain hate her just as fiercely. Even if this Mordred wasn't the one he despised. Sir Agravain, you needn't be so anxious. Even if we all left, Father would at most sigh a few times. Her greatest faith lies in her own divine power, honed over 800 years of wandering the world. We are merely tools to handle her errands. Sir Mordred, answer the question directly. Their eyes met, but Mordred remained silent. Her silence, however, was a clear declaration of her choice. Agravain sighed. Gawain and Lancelot exchanged a glance, then silently moved to block Mordred's escape route. Mordred, if you wanted to leave, you should have done so right after setting the fire to lure the king back. Sir Gawain. No. Since you call me Mordred, I should call you brother. After all, besides father and Queen Mother, I also have Mother Morgan. Brother Gawain, Brother Agravain, do you truly believe the Lion King's ideal is correct? She has completely abandoned the code of chivalry. Besides, the reason I didn't leave is obviously because I bear father's blessing. No matter where I go, she can sense me. Do you think my departure would be seen as following mother, or as inviting divine punishment upon father? At the word brother, Gawain's steps faltered slightly. Agravain, however, remained stone-faced. Sir Gawain, this is the king's choice. Do not forget your oath. Mordred, you heard him. Gawain's voice fell, and he resumed his advance. Now, if Mordred wanted to escape, she would have to fight her way out. Just then, the Lion King, who had returned due to the fire and taken a short rest, emerged. Having removed her helmet, she now wore a golden crown adorned with a cross. Her eyes had turned a cold, emotionless emerald green. Before even entering the room, she grasped the situation from the knight's positions. With a wave of her hand, she revoked the rampage blessing she had bestowed upon Mordred. Then, without a word, she pointed her right index finger directly at Mordred. In an instant, a storm compressed to its absolute limit slammed into Mordred before she could even react. The single blow sent her flying backward like a streak of light, shattering the royal palace wall, collapsing New Camelot's towering city wall, and embedding her deep within the wilderness beyond. Yet, even after all that, Mordred wasn't dead. She wasn't even severely injured. The king, now possessing only her divinity, had merely unleashed an attack to expel a knight who no longer belonged to her. Of course, there was another reason she held back. This Mordred had earned the right to reside within New Camelot City. This was different from the Mordred Guinevere's memories recalled, the one who should have been summoned. The original Mordred had no residency rights, and was only permitted to enter the city during the day to report on her duties. This meant the Mordred now climbing out of the crater was more favored by the Lion King. She had previously passed the holy selection. My king, you. The last shred of humanity left in me tells me I am very fond of her. In the throne room, even Agravain fell silent. His lowered face, however, seemed subtly less grim. With Mordred's issue resolved, it was time to address the incompetence of Lancelot and Gawain. Mordred's rampage blessing. Which of you wants it? The Lion King's voice was colder than before, her tone declarative. Chapter 161, Chapter 161, The Possibility of Grand Hassan. 1,350 words. Meanwhile, Guinevere and her group were in deep trouble. After a fierce battle, over 500 refugees had successfully escaped. While some intended to return home, more than 200 remained, staring at them with expectant eyes. Bedivere, Guinevere said, "Do you think we've been saddled with them?" "I don't think so. Didn't those two assassins say they had a place to shelter the refugees?" In the wilderness, Guinevere withdrew her sword from a bandit's stomach. Her ruthlessness made Ritsuka and the others hesitate, wanting to speak but holding back. It also stopped certain refugees with ulterior motives from trying to curry favor. Precisely because the world was ending, alongside the more honest refugees, there were always those with flexible minds who turned to banditry, hoping to prolong their own survival. They had simply chosen the wrong targets, and their heads, already tucked into their waistbands, fell prematurely. Sheathing her sword, causing it to vanish from her hand, Guinevere walked toward the sole surviving 100 faces, and the now armless Hassan of Intoxicated Smoke. In Guinevere's memory, Hassan of Intoxicated Smoke was supposed to have died while escorting refugees. He had sacrificed his life to buy them time, hoping to halt Tristan's advance. But tragically, the Hassan of Intoxicated Smoke from her memories hadn't known that Tristan could kill from afar with a mere flick of his bowstring. His death back then had been heroic, yet utterly meaningless. "Tell me, Mr. Hassan of Intoxicated Smoke, how much farther is it to this east village you mentioned?" "About a day's journey." His arms were gone, and his steps were unsteady. But with his face hidden beneath the white skull mask, it was impossible to tell how much longer he could endure. Still, he was a member of the Old Men of the Mountains Assassin Order. To attain his current abilities, he had carved off his own nose and sewn on the mask. His tolerance for pain far surpassed that of any ordinary person. Besides, Da Vinci-chan had already treated his wounds. At the thought of Da Vinci-chan, Guinevere's gaze shifted to the front of the group. There a car, a fully wooden vehicle powered by servant mana, was being driven by Mash. Several refugee children were inside, laughing with delight at the unprecedented contraption. "Amazing. Not only can you assist in combat, you also know healing, and can even build a car. This doll body is incredibly exquisite, and I bet you can do even more, can't you?" Da Vinci-chan had been bustling about, primarily tending to the wounded. But among them all, none were more severely injured than Hassan of Intoxicated Smoke. So, after completing her rounds, she returned to this spot. This was Guinevere's first private conversation with Da Vinci-chan. "Miss Ruler, you actually know what a car is?" I retain memories from my previous summonings. For instance, my last summoning was during the Fourth Holy Grail War. The group continued forward, and neither Guinevere nor Da Vinci-chan broke their stride. But that surprised came from a projection screen, from Dr. Romani of Chaldea, whom Guinevere was meeting for the first time. "Dr. Romani, is something wrong?" "No, nothing. I just remembered that the former director participated in the Fourth Holy Grail War, but Miss Ruler isn't mentioned in the surviving records." Pfft. Perhaps it's because we participated in different worlds' fourth Holy Grail wars. Romani is terrible at acting, Guinevere thought. He can't help but raise his cup to drink whenever he lies. But even knowing his true identity is the king of mages Solomon, since he still wants to interact with everyone as a normal person, Guinevere won't expose him. Hey, Dr. Romani, she called out, isn't your analysis of this world finished yet? If Miss Magimari knew you were this inefficient, she'd be very disappointed, you know. It's almost done. Based on my initial scans, I thought Chaldea's enemies would be god-possessed crusaders. Who would have thought? Wait, you said Magimari, right? Did you hear that, Da Vinci-chan? Magimari exists. Suddenly, Dr. Romani on the projection screen became agitated, nearly prompting Da Vinci-chan to cut the connection. Fortunately, he quickly waved his hands, signaling he was ready to share the new information he'd found. Hassan-I Sabah, the assassin order active around the 11th century. Legend says there were 19 successive Hassans in total, and all 19 used the name Hassan. The distinction between them, as you've seen, is that each successive Hassan possessed different abilities. But that's not what I wanted to talk about. The assassin class among servants is Hassan. In every normal Holy Grail war, the one occupying the assassin class will always be one of the Hassans. Romani, get to the point. Ahem, what I mean is, you should check if the first Hassan has also arrived in this era. Since the assassin class is named after Hassan, then the legendary pinnacle of the Hassans. That first Hassan must be the Grand Assassin. If we could get his help. Romani's words were cut off. Da Vinci-chan had calmly ended the communication. The reason was simple. Near her and Guinevere stood not only Bedivere, who seemed to be acting as their guard, but also the Hassan of intoxicated smoke, who was supposed to be undergoing her re-examination. Mr. Hassan of intoxicated smoke, about what Dr. Romani said. Lord First Hassan wouldn't concern himself with such trivial matters. Besides, if you intend to scheme against the first Hassan, then we must part ways here. The debt we owe you. I will repay it with my own life. As he spoke, Hassan of intoxicated smoke moved to bite his tongue, intending to create a fait accompli. But Guinevere, anticipating his dramatic self-sacrifice, struck the moment she sensed his intent. She shattered the mouth of his white skull mask, and thrust 2 fingers into his mouth. Her fingers pressed against Hassan's neat teeth, pinning down his soft tongue. In return, she received a gaze filled with astonishment and humiliation. As an assassin, he had long since abandoned any semblance of a conventional appearance. This was the first time anyone had treated him in such a manner. Mr. Hassan of intoxicated smoke, you're biting me. Besides, why would we want your life? And how should I put this? When it comes to defeating the Lion King, we're on the same side. Why would you assume the first Hassan wouldn't help without even asking? Da Vinci-chan, you were at the Sun King's temple, weren't you? You must have seen the Sun King's head slide from his neck, right? Da Vinci-chan, though puzzled by how Guinevere knew about their experience at the Sun King's tomb, nodded, confirming the truth of Guinevere's words. Mr. Hassan of intoxicated smoke, you can also ask 100 Faces. Ask them if they successfully rescued people from the Sun King's palace. If the Sun King were unharmed, how could they possibly have succeeded? Guinevere's line of questioning was too direct. The only member of 100 Faces remaining with the refugees quickly stepped forward. After hearing the question, he corroborated Guinevere's statement. With these 2 questions answered, everyone present realized who must have been capable of taking the Sun King's head. He was one of the Golden Three, a king said to rival Egypt's strongest god king. Even setting aside the non-aggression pact between the Lion King and the Sun King, the fully deified Lion King could never have defeated him so silently. In this singularity, the only one capable of such a feat. So, Lord First Hassan has already made his move. Suddenly, Hassan of intoxicated smoke and 100 Faces went limp, the tension they had held for so long finally releasing. The realization that first Hassan had not abandoned the world acted like a stabilizing anchor in their hearts. Meanwhile, Da Vinci Chan and the others in Chaldea also quietly breathed a sigh of relief. Regardless, the priority now was to get the refugees to East Village, so they would no longer be exposed to the threats of bandits, monsters, living corpses, and the like in the wilderness. Chapter 162. Chapter 162, Guinevere, you can try to take Excalibur. 1316 words. Round Table, King Arthur's Sayings, Number 8. Even the meat of monstrous creatures retains its nutritional value. Mash, please repeat after me. Huh? Why yes. Even the meat of monstrous creatures retains its nutritional value. After the communication with Dr. Romani ended, the journey to East Village continued. Several hours later, food and water became the group's most pressing problem. But just as the desert had its sea demons, so too did this scorched wasteland. With these tall, anemone-like monsters available, the group wouldn't lack for food. That's right, Mash Kirilite. Time to eat. Sometimes, survival is truly cruel. Guh, Mash, what are you talking about? This is actually pretty good. It just oozes a bit of black, gelatinous fat. Guinevere handled starting the fire, while Da Vinci Chan was in charge of finding skewers for grilling. When seared by Guinevere's golden flames, more of the harmful substances in the sea demon tentacles were burned away, resulting in a much better texture. Not only did Bedivere, Mash, Ritsuka, and the refugees eat with delighted smiles, but even the two assassins reached for a second helping. During the several hours of travel, Da Vinci Chan had already crafted a pair of wooden prosthetic limbs for Hassan of intoxicated smoke. Though their quality was far inferior to Bedivere's silver arm, when I get back to Chaldea, I'll definitely run some experiments with Dr. Romani. I'm going to create something that can rival the silver arm. Despite being a puppet herself, Da Vinci Chan ate with genuine enjoyment. Watching her, Guinevere also felt a sense of joy, remembering that in the original timeline, Da Vinci Chan would have been defeated during Lancelot's pursuit. The Lion King's side had already lost Tristan, while Chaldea's side had managed to keep Da Vinci Chan. With this shift in their favor, and knowing more servants awaited them in the East Village, Guinevere was confident of victory. She felt it wouldn't take much longer. With this in mind, she picked up a skewer of grilled sea demon tentacles and walked to the outermost edge of the group. Then, she took out the rainbow gem that allowed her to speak with her other self. The servant contract had been transferred, and now Ritsuka was supplying the mana. Consequently, Guinevere redirected the mana she had instinctively been drawing from the rainbow gem, and began storing it in her replica holy sword. She intended to use it as a reserve mana supply, or to unleash an even more devastating noble phantasm release in the near future. In a clash between noble phantasms of the same rank, the wielder's mana capacity was crucial. Other me, she began, do you think our replica holy sword can defeat that holy lance? We fought Lia with it during our lifetime, didn't we? You already know the answer. Yes, we can't win, not after the Holy Lance's restraints are released. But are you thinking that the Lion King's Holy Lance doesn't even need its restraints released? After all, she's practically a storm goddess now, completely fused with the lance. In the other world, with Merlin's help and some tools left behind by the old man of the jewels, they had finally managed to intermittently observe this singularity. This was only possible because Guinevere possessed the rainbow gem, which served as an anchor for their observation. While Guinevere worried about her insufficient combat strength, her other self shared the same concern. However, they couldn't send any more aid for the time being, nor could they afford to make Guinevere wait any longer. Guinevere could wait, but the Lion King certainly would not. Other me, go have a heart-to-heart with Bedivere. I just tried holding Leah's Excalibur, and it didn't reject me. You should know that the Excalibur in your singularity is housed within Bedivere's silver arm. I believe that Excalibur won't reject you either. The only trouble is, if you want to use its holy sword of the planet form, you'll need the approval of the Round Table Knights from that world. Without their recognition, it'll be no different from our replica holy sword. The wind howled across the wasteland. After a long pause, the other Guinevere sent back a lengthy message. After reading it, Guinevere fell silent, and took the last bite of her roasted sea demon tentacle. The tentacle actually tasted quite good, sending a strange, electrifying tingle through Guinevere, a sensation she'd never experienced before. I understand, the other Guinevere's message concluded. I'll try to gain their approval. Once I'm confident, I'll ask Bedivere for the holy sword. Guinevere put away the rainbow gem, letting it continue to charge the replica holy sword. With another snap of her fingers, she conjured flames, incinerating a new wave of sea demons swarming their party. The bandits were gone, and the living corpses had become scarce, but monsters of all kinds continued to pour in relentlessly. After finishing their meal, the group resumed their journey toward the mountains, where the old man of the mountain's east village was nestled among the sprawling peaks. As they ascended to higher ground, their view expanded, revealing a series of massive craters dotting the landscape. Each pit was perfectly circular, over a kilometer in diameter, and uniformly sized, clearly the work of a single, immense power. Is this the power of the Holy Lance? The Lion King's divine punishment in this world? Upon seeing the craters, the Chaldea members asked the refugees what had happened. The refugees' explanation confirmed what Guinevere already knew. Each crater on this land represented a village. It wasn't just the desolate wilderness that drove the refugees toward New Camelot for survival. It was also the ever-present threat of the Lion King's divine punishment, which could strike at any moment. Even if they had nothing to eat and faced starvation, gathering in one place was a death sentence. Any such gathering would soon become the site of a new crater. The Lion King wanted to gather more people, who could pass the holy selection. To achieve this, she deliberately created an environment where everyone was forced to seek refuge in New Camelot City. Ritsuka, little sister, one of the refugees said, so you didn't know before. No wonder you couldn't understand why we wouldn't listen to anything unless it came from someone who'd passed the holy selection. Passing it and entering Camelot City, that's truly our only hope. But what about the old man of the mountain's village? Ritsuka asked. Do you know? The chances of encountering the old man of the mountain, and being rescued by them, are about the same as entering Camelot City. Besides, their movements are unpredictable. Without a guide, you'd never find their hidden village. But Camelot City, it just stands there waiting. How could the chances be? Ritsuka, little sister, how many people do you think lived around the original holy city of Jerusalem? And how many do you think the old man of the mountain's village can shelter? The refugees were rationalizing their choices, but what they said was also the truth. The old man of the mountain had only decided to act, to begin rescuing the few remaining refugees, after the situation had become irreversible. They who had always remained aloof from worldly affairs, were finally forced to intervene. Hearing this, 100 Faces and Hassan of Intoxicated Smoke felt a pang of shame. Their own power was so limited. The hope of saving these people and repairing this singularity. As the refugees trudged onward, heads bowed, 100 Faces and Intoxicated Smoke exchanged a glance. They were willing to stake their lives to vouch for the Chaldea party, to trade their lives for the first Hassan's intervention. But first they had to convince the men standing before them at the head of the column, Hassan of the Cursed Arm, the leader of the East Village. Their eyes met, and 100 Faces and Intoxicated Smoke hurried forward. Chapter 163, Chapter 163, Hello, Arash. 1258 words. You're saying this is a Lion King from another possibility, and these are her knights. And their goal is to eliminate the one in New Camelot City. And these three are from Chaldea. Their mission is to repair the distortion in the human order. As a Hassan, the men blocking the mountain pass wore the same black bodysuit and white skull mask. But as the Hassan known for his cursed arm, his right arm was abnormally large, wrapped in thick, dark bandages as if sealing something within. Upon their first meeting, he learned of the situation from 100 Faces and Hassan of Intoxicated Smoke. Yet, his immediate reaction was suspicion, and he chose to test them with force. The match is decided, Lord Cursed Arm. I understand how you feel, but please concede for now. Regardless, they did save 100 faces, Hassan of intoxicated smoke, and the hundreds of people here. If they were enemies, with their power, they wouldn't have needed to put on an act after finding this place. Guinevere had been the one to fight Cursed Arm. With just 3 strikes, she had brought the tip of her sword to his eyes. Afterward, a man appeared to mediate. He carried what looked like an ordinary mahogany bow, and his face, build, and attire were all unremarkable. But the moment Guinevere saw his heartwarming smile, and the cyan Persian armor he wore, his name surfaced in her mind. Just as she remembered, the great hero had truly appeared. Cursed Arm's subsequent response confirmed her thoughts. You are Lord Arash. Ugh. Guh. But Lord Cursed Arm, please be more honest. Didn't we receive the news yesterday? When you heard that a high-ranking Round Table knight had been killed and hundreds of refugees rescued, weren't you dancing with joy, shouting that nothing could be more satisfying? The very reason we're here now is because you couldn't wait to come and greet them yourself, isn't it? Ah, Lord Arash. That's. After all, it had been a long time. What Guinevere could recall was the general plot progression of this singularity, and roughly which servants were involved. She had long forgotten the specific personalities of some servants. Watching Arash's teasing and Hassan of the Cursed Arm's tsundere-like behavior, acting tough but secretly caring, she was still surprised to find that Hassan was at tsundere. Tilting her head, she pictured the dark-skinned man blushing furiously beneath his white skull mask. Guinevere couldn't help but laugh out loud. All right, Lord Hassan, and you, Lord Arash. We can sort things out between us later, but shouldn't we escort the refugees to your east village first? Speaking of which, can you truly afford to feed so many people? The entire journey here had been through barren wilderness. As far as the eye could see, there wasn't a single patch of green. This singularity had long since become incapable of growing crops. King Arthur. King of Knights. Or perhaps. Just call me ruler. Then, ruler, your grace, I ask that you witness the answer to your question with your own eyes once we reach the village. Hassan was still too reserved to express his gratitude directly, so Arash answered for him. But even after Arash spoke, Hassan didn't deny it. With Hassan of the Cursed Arm now guiding them, the group's pace quickened considerably. Once they reached a specific location, the other 100 faces who had been scouting the perimeter returned, their mission complete. Impressive. To perfectly conceal a village of this size without a bounded field. Da Vinci-chan was the most curious about the village. With her enthusiastic personality, she had already latched onto Hassan, peppering him with questions. And tsunderes by nature struggle most against beautiful women, who cling to them no matter how much they're pushed away. So your solution for the food shortage is for you to constantly go out hunting, to the point where your spirit origin is in disarray. Well, in this era, at least there's an endless supply of monsters, right? The old men of the mountains villages were numerous but small. The arrival of 200 refugees would strain their already meager resources even further. As the refugees had said, their chances of survival here were even slimmer than trying to reach New Camelot City. But now that she had arrived and witnessed the plight of this mountain village, Guinevere instinctively began devising solutions. She had misremembered some details earlier, thinking the servant with the noble phantasm of an endless rice bag had already joined the East Village. But now, after reviewing her memories again, she remembered that the servant had apparently been captured by Agravain, and was imprisoned somewhere with Hassan of Serenity. At the same time, she also recalled another servant who made it hard for her to keep a straight face, a gender-bent version of the servant known as Sanzang. No, wait, in the FGO universe, Sanzang was originally a girl. Outside the mud brick houses, Guinevere watched as the original residents clutched their food tightly, with only a few willing to share their dried tentacles. After a long moment of thought, she finally let out a deep sigh. She knew there were certain things she, as an outsider, needed to take charge of immediately. Arash, Your Grace, you don't want conflict between the new refugees and the original residents, do you? Please, use your influence to persuade the residents to share enough food for one meal. Guinevere, would you mind taking on a difficult task? Miss Ruler, are we going hunting? Yes. You, me, Mash, and Ritsuka, the four of us will go. As for Da Vinci-chan, since she's not suited for combat, she can stay here and help build shelters. As she spoke, Arash was already moving. Given his reputation and the fact that he had hunted most of the residents' food himself, he successfully completed his task. After taking Guinevere to find Mash and Ritsuka, Guinevere was surprised to discover they had gone outside the village, drawing a massive summoning circle under the observation of 100 Faces and Hassan of intoxicated smoke. Any luck, Ritsuka? Can you summon a new servant? No, Dr. Romani. The ley lines here are nearly depleted. I don't think we can summon any new servants in this era. Upon arriving in a new singularity, setting up a magic circle, and summoning new servants, this was the routine Chaldea's team had grown accustomed to. But now it seemed this era could no longer support more servants. Faced with this reality, Ritsuka first looked disappointed, then threw herself into Mash's arms. After taking a deep breath, she forced herself to rally her spirits. Watching them from a distance, Guinevere couldn't help but chuckle. She, too, wanted to resolve this situation quickly, so she could rush into Leah's embrace. With that thought, she raised her right fist to her lips and licked it lightly. Some stars had dimmed, and some rituals had lost their meaning, but Guinevere found satisfaction in this act, psychologically replenishing her Leah elements. Mash, Ritsuka, we have 3 tasks ahead of us. First and most urgent is to gather as much food as possible for the people of the East Village. Second, we need to increase our combat strength, for example, by helping Mash get used to more of Galahad's power. Third, we need to gain the help of more servants, such as the first Hassan, or the wild servants currently scattered throughout this singularity. As for the wild servants, Your Grace, 100 Faces, could I ask you to search for them? Chapter 164, News of Mordred. 1,220 words. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days passed. Guinevere and the others spent their time hunting to help the villagers. During this period, Guinevere also conducted special training for Mash, Ritsuka, and Guinevere. Whether it was Guinevere's swordsmanship or Galahad's combat techniques, Guinevere knew far more than either of them. Miss Ruler, the Guinevere from your world, was he really as strong as you say? He was thrashed by me in the training grounds every so often for over a decade. How could he not get stronger? Besides, he was Leah's, this body's personal knight. He understood shame all too well. Guinevere could now withstand one more sword strike than he could during their first spar. Though his progress over these 3 days was small, it was not insignificant. As for Mash, after learning Galahad's true name, her base stats and inherent skills had changed. But the most significant transformation was to her noble phantasm. Her instinctively deployed pseudo-noble phantasm had transformed directly into Lord Camelot, now as a castle of distant ideals, a true noble phantasm whose true name could be invoked. As for its power and usage, Guinevere could teach Mash everything from scratch. After all, she had used this dining table herself, it had originally been hers. Clang! After defeating Guinevere, Guinevere struck Mash's shield with her sword, producing a sharp ring. Just as she was about to move, Mash had already anticipated her direction. When the second, more powerful strike landed, the clang was even louder. Mash's iron boots sank several inches into the ground, but she held firm. Then came the third and fourth strikes. With each passing day, Mash mastered the new combat techniques emerging within her, making her defense increasingly flawless, truly worthy of being called Lancelot's daughter. Of course, achieving flawless defense with a sword and achieving it with a massive shield were 2 entirely different levels of difficulty. But the problem was that Mash wasn't limited to defense. If Guinevere wasn't careful, she'd get smacked by the back of Mash's shield. Clang! Another thunderous crash echoed across the wasteland. This time, it was Guinevere who was forced back slightly, needing to reset her stance. Accumulating power while enduring, Mash would unleash a devastating counterattack the moment an opportunity presented itself. Not bad. You've taken my teachings to heart. Probing, searching for openings, then striking for victory, this was Guinevere's original combat style in her past life. In her eyes, Mash, as a shield-bearer, was even better suited for it than she had been. After all, with such a massive shield, Mash could more easily weather the observation and searching phase. However, your combat experience is still lacking, and your observation skills need more training. I've already revealed 3 openings, and you only attacked on the 3rd. Miss Ruler, that's not it, Mash replied. I noticed the first 2 openings as well. I just wasn't sure if they were traps. I already told you, we haven't reached that stage in our lessons yet. But if you truly did notice them, then... Very good. Sheathing her sword, Guinevere smiled. She had witnessed the progress of both Bedivere and Mash, and she couldn't be anything but satisfied, especially with Mash's rapid improvement. She felt that if the current Mash faced the Sphinx again, she might lack the offensive power to kill it, but she would never lose again. In fact, she could probably knock the Sphinx into the sky like a shooting star. And speaking of shooting stars, whether hunting or training, Guinevere and the others were making quite a stir. Every morning, under the guise of physical training, they would first run 10 kilometers away from East Village. As expected of a great hero. Just as Guinevere finished speaking, an arrow with a cloth message tied to it descended from the sky, embedding itself in the ground right before them. The great hero Arash. Whenever something happened in East Village, he would notify them with an arrow message. A distance of 10 kilometers was as simple as drinking water for him. In his legend, the arrow he fired at the cost of his life crossed 2,500 kilometers, a true intercontinental missile. Ruler, what does Arash's arrow message say? It had been 3 days. Hassan of the Cursed Arm was busy with village affairs, Da Vinci-chan continued building houses, and Hassan of Intoxicated Smoke had vanished after saying he was going to find the first Hassan. Only 100 Faces had agreed to Guinevere's request. He had dispersed his numerous selves as widely as possible, tasked with scouting New Camelot City's movements and searching for any potential rogue servants. It's news from 100 Faces. A rogue servant? No, it's about Mordred. For the past 2 days, she's been lingering on the outskirts of the Sun King's desert, constantly killing attacking sphinxes. Huh? It wasn't just Ritsuka who was confused, Guinevere was puzzled as well. The Mordred of this world had been summoned by the Lion King. Even if the Lion King disliked her, and had exiled her for committing arson in the Holy City, she shouldn't have been left to wander alone. Indeed, in the arrow message relayed by Arash, he had specifically noted that Mordred was not accompanied by any other Round Table Knights or Enforcement Knights. 100 Faces had even suggested that this was the perfect opportunity to eliminate Mordred. Ruler, if Mordred is alone, could it be that she has betrayed the Lion King, and is seeking you out? She is the Knight of Rebellion, after all. Guinevere still didn't know that this Mordred was her daughter. If she had, she wouldn't be speculating at all. But because she didn't know, she had to consider the possibility that this was a feint, a tactic to lure the tiger from its mountain. We've been making such a commotion here every day, yet the Knights of New Camelot still haven't attacked. Does that mean they're afraid? If so, what if they immediately launch an assault the moment we leave? Ritsuka couldn't answer Guinevere's questions, but Guinevere couldn't completely ignore the possibility Ritsuka had raised. She glanced at Mash, then at Ritsuka's command spells, now fully restored to 3 seals. She made her decision, she would go meet Mordred. She didn't know what was wrong with her. The mere thought of ignoring Mordred or having 100 Faces invite her over filled her with a faint unease, as if her ruler class granted her access to some unseen divine revelation. Of course, she knew that a servant's full capabilities weren't always listed on their status sheet. Many abilities rooted in legend were simply omitted to avoid redundancy. For example, Herlia, blessed by the fairies, could walk on water, yet this ability wasn't mentioned on her status sheet. Bedivere, Mash, Ritsuka, you all stay here, she instructed. If anything unexpected happens while I'm looking for Mordred, Ritsuka, use a command spell to recall me immediately. Wait, ruler. Could this be a trap aimed at you? Ha, Guinevere scoffed with a confident smile. Then I'd like to see what kind of trap it is. Even if I were to face Lancelot, Gawain, Agravain, and Mordred all at once, and even if I couldn't defeat them, they would never be able to capture me as long as I chose to retreat. After speaking, she didn't waste another minute. Chapter 165, Chapter 165, Queen Mother, why are you in Father's body? 1311 words. Will Queen Mother come? Won't Queen Mother come? Will Queen Mother come? At the edge of the Sun King's desert, having just slain another batch of sphinxes, Mordred was divining the future with a handful of sand. One grain meant she'll come, the next she won't. But as the tedious game neared its end, Mordred abruptly tossed the remaining sand away, unwilling to risk an unpleasant outcome. Though she had been freed after the Lion King revoked her blessing and blasted her out of New Camelot, Mordred was still a servant summoned by the Lion King, her mana supplied by her. Does this version of Father really think I'm an idiot? Or has she lost her mind, actually believing I'd run straight to Queen Mother after she took back her blessing? Queen Mother took so many refugees with her. If I went directly to her and brought danger along, she'd definitely punish me by making me do 10 sets of exam papers. She plopped down on the body of a half-dead sphinx. The scorching sun had forced Mordred to shed her full armor, leaving her in a red armored skirt and a small red tube top. Her brilliant golden hair was tied into a high ponytail with a red ribbon. The Red Dragon of Great Britain, she was very fond of this title the people gave the King of Knights, and because of it, she had grown to love the color red. Thud. Wiping away beads of sweat, she set down the heavy king's sword. Because it was her, the blade remained utterly unstained. And just as she had instantly recognized Guinevere's identity from the replica holy sword, the moment Guinevere arrived, and saw the king's sword in Mordred's hand still shining with brilliant light, she knew at once, this was her and Leah's little M.O. ruler, Your Grace, you. 100 Faces, Your Grace, you may return. You are no longer needed here. After a brief observation, Guinevere found no other knights nearby. She already knew from Ritsuka that the area around East Village was clear as well. But what truly made her stop observing was the reality unfolding before her eyes. With that single command, Guinevere emerged from her hiding place and walked toward Mordred, making no effort to conceal her presence. In the next instant, Mordred sensed Guinevere's approach, feeling the urgency radiating from her. Surprise, then understanding dawned. Then, Mordred also got up, charging at Guinevere even faster. But facing her attack, Guinevere simply opened her arms, shed her armor, and stood in her blue dress, waiting for Mordred to throw herself into her embrace. Queen Mother, it's you, right? Why are you wearing Father's body? It was a familiar touch, a familiar scent, yet the two should never have been one. After rubbing her face against Guinevere like a clueless fawn, Mordred took a step back. Their eyes met, and she uttered words that made Guinevere want to smash her forehead against hers. Thud. The sharp collision left red marks on both mother and daughter's foreheads. But seeing Mordred deliberately rolling on the sand and wailing in mock pain, Guinevere could only puff out her cheeks in exasperation and share half of her heat-insulating holy shroud with her. You're a girl. Act with some dignity. Queen Mother, you know I hate it when people point out my gender. Whether you call me female or male, I hate it. What, talking back to your mother now? Besides, hate it all you want, but it's not like you don't have. Pfft. Just like Leah's child, already boasting an even bigger runway at such a young age. Is that so? But didn't you like Father's runway, Queen Mother? I heard that after Father grew up, you didn't like her as much. Were you feeling insecure? Oh right, Queen Mother. When I grow up, I'll have inherited Father's genes too. Mordred currently appeared as she did at 15, even flatter than the king of knights before the Battle of Camlan. But her words had indeed piqued Guinevere's interest. Because of their feigned death and subsequent travels after the Battle of Camlan, neither she nor Leah had ever seen Mordred fully grown. From that perspective, they had been terribly irresponsible parents. "Mordred, do you resent us for leaving and not returning for decades?" "Of course. Before I died, the ones I wanted to see most were Father and Queen Mother. And with you gone for so long, I worried you might have died in some obscure corner." As they spoke, they both sat on the half-dead Sphinx, Guinevere behind, Mordred in front. Guinevere not only wrapped her arms around Mordred's waist, but also rested her chin on her now cool shoulder. As the mother who had watched Mordred grow, Guinevere was naturally curious about her development, whether her body bore any scars. But no matter what, she would never feel lust for her. Besides, after Guinevere touched Mordred's cool abdomen, her only concern was that dressing so lightly would be bad for her health. "From now on, wear more clothes." "Oh." It was a long, drawn-out "oh." Mordred could feel Guinevere's warmth enveloping her entire body. At the same time, she sensed Guinevere's mood darken after she had spoken those words. She shifted, finding a more comfortable position. It felt strange to be nestled in her Queen Mother's arms after living a full life, and even stranger to feel the presence of both her father and Queen Mother at once. But this was exactly what Mordred had always dreamed of. Time slipped through their fingers like sand. The sun rose in the east and set in the west, and soon it was dusk. When Mordred next opened her eyes, she had slept soundly while leaning against Guinevere, experiencing a sense of peace she hadn't felt in decades. She opened and closed her mouth a dozen times. By the time Guinevere grew tired of pretending to be asleep, Mordred finally made up her mind and whispered into her ear. "I failed you, Father and Queen Mother. I confidently took over the kingdom, only to lead it step by step to ruin. I truly lacked the talent to be a king. If you lack the talent to be a king, then just be a little girl. Listen, when we leave this world, Leah and I will perform a heroic spirit summoning for you. When we do, you must answer our call. My little Mordred, aren't you curious to see what Leah looks like in a school uniform?" Guinevere didn't try to claim Mordred had been a good king. The truth was, Mordred had been too eager for glory and reckless, which led to the true fall of Camelot. But Guinevere also didn't deny her own share of the blame. She and Artoria had let go too early, and her own modern, forward-thinking upbringing of Mordred had been ill-suited for that era. In short, we all share the blame for the kingdom's fall. But that's all in the past. I have no interest in changing history, or creating some lost belt just to fix our regrets. I'm being incredibly selfish now. All I want is to enjoy life with my family in the modern world. Mordred, as my and Leah's child, you have my permission to be selfish too." Guinevere continued to hold Mordred tightly. She didn't know how much her words had sunk in, or if Mordred felt any sense of release, but this was the path she had chosen. Deep down, Guinevere's greatest fear was becoming like the King of Knights from her past life's memories, the one who sought to change Great Britain's fate. Such a wish, a life lived solely for others, seemed utterly tragic to Guinevere. "Mordred, would you like to talk to Leah now?" As she spoke, Guinevere took out the rainbow gem. Chapter 166, Chapter 166, Mordred, could you step aside for a moment? 1682 words. "Miss Ruler, if you're that curious, why don't you go take a look yourself? The child's grown up. She has things she wants to say to her father and mother in private." "Huh? Father? I know you're curious, but just hold it in." The scorching sun beat down on the sand dunes, where monsters like sea demons occasionally appeared. 100 Faces had waited until she saw that Guinevere and Mordred weren't fighting. In fact, they seemed to be having a pleasant conversation, before slowly approaching. This particular 100 Faces was a tall, purple-haired woman with an 8-pack of abs. Her question stemmed from her continued belief that Guinevere was another king of knights. "By the way, is there still no news from Hassan of intoxicated smoke? And has the Lion King still not attacked the East Village?" Miss Ruler, there's no news from either side. However, regarding the wild servants, another one of me has made a discovery. We've found where Serenity is being held captive. Guinevere resisted the urge to comment on whether Hassan of Serenity could truly be considered a wild servant. After arriving at the East Village, she had confirmed that all the successive Hassans had been summoned to this singularity. However, due to the prolonged conflict with New Camelot, many Hassans had already fallen. For instance, Hassan of the Quaking Pipe was defeated by Lancelot, and Hassan of the Shadow Scraper fell to Gawain. If not for Guinevere's intervention, Hassan of Intoxicated Smoke would have also died at Tristan's hands. In terms of individual combat strength, aside from the first Hassan, none of the subsequent Hassans were a match for any of the Lion King's Knights of the Round Table. Serenity, you say? From a purely strategic standpoint, Serenity wasn't worth rescuing. But Guinevere remembered that the servant with the noble phantasm of endless rice was imprisoned alongside her. That servant, along with the Sanzang from her memories, were the wild servants Guinevere truly wanted to find. 100 Faces hadn't located Sanzang yet, but they had found the other one first. That works. Once Mordred finishes talking with her father, you can lead us there. Yes, Miss Ruler. After speaking, 100 Faces swung her sword, cutting down another sea demon that had charged them. Several more minutes passed, and Guinevere's sense of unease grew stronger. Urged on by this foreboding feeling, Guinevere finally stepped forward, intending to interrupt Mordred and Leah's conversation. But at that very moment, she felt a tremor of mana in the sky, and a surge of mana deep within the desert. But just 3 seconds later, the mana in both the sky and the desert dissipated completely. Suddenly, Guinevere understood why Mordred had chosen to wait at the desert's edge. At this stage, the Sun King and the Lion King still had a non-aggression pact. The Lion King couldn't easily unleash her divine punishment upon this desert. Guinevere clicked her tongue softly, mentally noting this small favor from the Sun King. She walked over to Mordred, ruffled her hair, and then draped herself bonelessly over Mordred's back. My good little Mordred, what were you and Leah talking about? We weren't talking about anything. The child has grown up and wants her privacy, Guinevere thought. But for some reason, Mordred's expression shifted to one of slight sadness, and she immediately became more candid. Mother, I was mostly talking with the other mother. But you both said the same thing, that I should be more selfish. Heh, isn't that a good thing? Is it? I'll assume for now that it is. But mother, I have another question. With both of you existing and talking to each other, don't you ever get confused? Don't you ever think the other one is the copy? What's there to be confused about? And as for copies, we're all just offshoots from our true selves on the throne of heroes. When the time comes, we'll all return to the throne and merge back into our original forms. That's just what servants are. Lying on Mordred's shoulder, Guinevere understood her worry. It's probably because she talked with the other Guinevere that she's the one feeling confused now, she thought. But hearing Guinevere's explanation, and realizing she truly had no, I'm the real one complex, Mordred let out a sigh of relief. I see. That's a relief. After all, I don't have as many class adaptations as you and father. I can't split myself into that many Mordreds. With a weight lifted from her heart, Mordred was in the mood to joke. Hearing this, Guinevere laughed aloud. Her mind naturally conjured an image of a crowd of Mordreds. Being surrounded by a bunch of Mordreds, just thinking about it makes me happy. By the way, Mordred, did Morgan speak to you? She did. Mother told me to retreat from this battlefield quickly, send my memories back to the throne of heroes, and then prepare to be summoned by her. She wants me to live with her over there. Mother, what do you think? Should I stay here and help? Or should I retreat now? As Mordred spoke, her eyes flickered with uncertainty, but thankfully, Guinevere, positioned behind her, couldn't see them. Personally, Guinevere desperately wanted Mordred to stay by her side. But the thought of her staying meant she would have to cross swords with the Lion King, the very father to whom she had sworn loyalty. Guinevere couldn't bear the idea of Mordred's still radiant king's sword being stained by such a conflict. "Mordred, could I ask you to wait for me in that other world? The me here will return to the throne of heroes soon, and synchronize my memories with my other self. How should I put this? I'll be a little jealous of my other self, but she's still me." Hearing this, Mordred let out a sigh of relief, and turned to hug Guinevere tightly. She could hear the reluctance in Guinevere's voice, but she also knew Guinevere was putting her first. In truth, however, whether Mordred retreated now was not her decision to make. She was the Lion King's last vestige of humanity, the bait cast to lure Guinevere. Now that the bait had been taken, the hook was snagged in a crevice of sand and stone, unable to reel in the fish. With her humanity finally exhausted, the Lion King's first move was to cut the line, completely severing her contract with Mordred. Perhaps in the Lion King's eyes, she had already fulfilled Mordred's wish. Keeping Mordred around any longer would only bring her unnecessary grief. Perhaps she, too, would be jealous of the tender love between mother and daughter, stung by the pain of Mordred's closeness to Guinevere. "Well then, Queen Mother. I'll really be going ahead now, okay?" Mordred's body began to fade, dissolving into spiritrons, a sign that she had lost her existence contract. Realizing what was happening to Mordred, Guinevere instinctively reached out to stop it. But then, she let out a relieved laugh, leaned in to kiss her dear Mordred's cheek, and flashed her most radiant smile. "Yes. You go on ahead. I'll be there soon." No more words were needed. Mordred's wish to apologize to her father and Queen Mother had been fulfilled. Her only regret was not being able to help more, but she had absolute faith in Guinevere's victory. Just as she had told the Lion King, whenever Guinevere fought Artoria, Guinevere always won. At the very end, Mordred returned the rainbow gem to Guinevere and vanished completely. Guinevere sighed, feeling the emptiness in her arms. Her emotions were a mix of joy and sorrow, joy that Mordred would surely find peace, and sorrow that she no longer had her little lion to cuddle. But after standing there blankly for several minutes, she picked up the rainbow gem again. As her eyes fell upon the text that had appeared on its surface, her joy and sorrow both melted away, replaced by amusement. "Queen Mother, I've arrived. It turns out time flows differently on each side. The Queen Mother here is talking to a version of you from several years in the future, or maybe several years in the past. Bleep, I think that's how it is. I really don't get it. Oh, by the way, Father looks so good in her student uniform. And I'm enrolling in school too. Queen Mother, you really have to come back soon." Reading Mordred's words on the rainbow gem, which seemed to overflow with joy, Guinevere felt a growing pang of jealousy, even though she knew the other Guinevere was still herself. Hey, other me. You must be twisted with jealousy right now, right? Don't be like that. Try placing the rainbow gem on your forehead. Merlin will try to sync our memories. We really are one and the same." Guinevere did as instructed. The memories synchronized, and suddenly, this Guinevere gained several years' worth of experience as a student at the clock tower. These experiences truly extended her life. The jealousy vanished, replaced by a smile. In her new memories, the little ones like Sakura and Rin had grown up. Mordred, now a rebellious girl in hot pants and a crop top, flashed her a V sign with one hand. Most importantly, she now had all the memories of the years she had spent with Leah. All these things were undeniably true. Putting away the rainbow gem, Guinevere picked up the half of the holy shroud that Mordred had dropped when she disappeared. A smile touched her lips. Her urgent mood had eased, allowing her to approach the conquest of this singularity with a more relaxed mindset. Anyway, first, I'll go rescue Serenity and Nanami. Then, I'll proactively visit the first Hassan and the Sun King. As for Sanzang, who's still missing, I'll just have to see if she can make it in time. Guinevere began to walk, deciding her next steps in her mind. Sigh, even though the experiences were real, I still want to fight alongside Liamor. Guinevere could never get enough of Artoria. Chapter 167, Chapter 167, Ritsuka, you'll die of dehydration. 1003 words. This is quite. Originally, Guinevere had planned to rescue the others with 100 Faces herself. But she hadn't gone far before she received a request for support from Ritsuka. Tristan's retreat and Lancelot's forced disappearance had weakened New Camelot's forces. This led Dr. Romani to believe that their side could now spare more power to maneuver freely. According to Cursed Arms reconnaissance, Gawain has remained at the city gate, continuing to oversee the holy selection for the refugees. Lancelot, on the other hand, hasn't been seen these past few days. As for Agravain, he seems to be traveling back and forth between New Camelot City and the fortress you're heading to. So that's why you think it's best for Ritsuka to go with me. And if she goes, Mash will naturally follow. Yes, Dr. Romani said seriously on the projected screen. He genuinely believed this was possible. Hearing his explanation, Guinevere couldn't deny it. She believed anyone might betray the Lion King, except Agravain. Yet, if they did encounter him soon, she would still try to persuade him first. Alright then, Mash, Ritsuka, let's set out. While Guinevere had been searching for Mordred, Mash had been sparring with Bedivere, further adapting to her new power. The changes to her armor's appearance were noticeable. A ceremonial rapier now hung at her waist, and where the lower edge of her armor had once exposed the line of her hips, an eggplant-colored skirt now fell to the backs of her knees. Her steel boots had also been extended, now covering her entire thighs instead of just her knees. From Guinevere's perspective, Mash had grown stronger but also less lewd. Hey, ruler. Where are you looking? Don't you dare look at my Mash with that disappointed expression. Yeah, Auntie-ruler. Are you getting hot for my Kohai? Though she was indeed far older than an auntie, and though Galahad was the one who should have called her that, hearing the term made Guinevere's expression instantly freeze. It was the same reaction Lancelot had when he heard Dad. But unlike Lancelot, and as a fellow woman, she could engage in lewd acts without any lewd intentions. For instance, she stood up from the back seat and licked the nape of Mash's neck as she drove. Auntie-ruler, are you serious? The latter's touch caused a far more severe mental short-circuit in Mash than the former's. If Guinevere hadn't truly sensed something was wrong, yanked Mash out of the driver's seat, and tossed her into Ritsuka's lap in the passenger seat before quickly taking the wheel herself, they might have directly experienced the power of this self-destructing car, without ever facing a single enemy. As a magecraft item crafted by the universal genius, the car genuinely possessed a self-destruct function, and its explosive power was far from negligible. But the playful chaos was only temporary, moving forward was the constant. After Ritsuka held Mash in her arms for a moment, Mash took the initiative to dismiss her armor, changing into her casual attire, a black backless dress, and a white jacket. Even in that short time, her weight had already made Ritsuka's legs tremble. Miss Ritsuka Fujimaru, are you interested in undergoing some nightly training? If you don't strengthen your body, you might find yourself completely powerless against Mash in a future battle. And from what I know, you've provoked quite a few servants. If you can't even handle Mash, how do you expect to survive against those beyond standard servants? Ritsuka, my girl, you'll die of dehydration. When Guinevere first started speaking, Ritsuka thought she was genuinely talking about combat. But as she listened, something felt off. By the time Guinevere mentioned dehydration, Ritsuka completely understood what she was implying. Before she could retort, Mash, still sitting on her lap, leaned back and asked, Senpai, why would you die of dehydration? And Mash will protect you, Senpai. I won't let any servant kill you. Ritsuka was wearing a short skirt, her healthy thighs exposed. After changing into her casual clothes, the hem of Mash's dress barely reached a third of the way up her own thighs. The friction from their movements made Ritsuka's face flush red, and she wrapped her arms around Mash's waist, falling silent. The car continued on. Guinevere chuckled softly and stopped teasing them. She glanced back to check on their companion, 100 Faces, only to find the assassin already fast asleep, finally able to rest peacefully. With 100 Faces asleep, who would give directions? Dr. Romani, of course, who had already synchronized with Serenity's coordinates, and was now sipping a fresh cup of coffee. After driving at a steady 30 kilometers per hour for 2 full hours, the group finally spotted their target fortress just as the sun began to set. It was a small stronghold, about the size of an ordinary castle. At its peak flew the banner of the Round Table Knight, Agravain, the very 100 Faces had mentioned. Both outside and inside the castle, numerous ordinary soldiers were stationed, alongside a handful of enforcement knights. Upon arriving in this era, the Lion King had summoned the Round Table Knights, and over 1,000 enforcement knights. Yet, this mere 1,000 was not enough to fully garrison New Camelot City, or maintain the operations of such a massive metropolis. Consequently, large numbers of ordinary soldiers were conscripted locally, all placed under the command of the administrator, Agravain. In life, Agravain's presence had maintained the stability of both the Round Table and the kingdom. After being summoned, he remained the most crucial factor in preserving that stability. Halt! Who goes there? The Camelot-style armor worn by the soldiers stirred a sense of nostalgia in Guinevere. But when the fortress guards slammed the gates shut and assumed a defensive posture, her mood soured. Answer me, she demanded. Is Agravain here? Dr. Romani had suggested they infiltrate the fortress to avoid unnecessary combat. But Guinevere, more often than not, preferred a frontal infiltration. Chapter 168, Chapter 168, It's appeared. Serenity and Ritsuka's. 1,297 words. The garrison inside the small fortress wasn't actually very large. Aside from a few enforcement knights, there were only about 30 ordinary soldiers. After easily knocking them down, and leaving the enforcement knights for Mash and Ritsuka to handle, Guinevere slowly walked toward the scattered and demoralized ordinary soldiers, who had lost all courage to attack again. Agravain, he isn't here. The soldiers in this fortress had already heard rumors of the other Lion King. Now, defeated so effortlessly and seeing her face, identical to the Lion King's, in the fading twilight, they finally realized who they were facing. Yet they remained silent. It was Agravain who had chosen them, trained them, and given them a chance to survive. Tell me, Guinevere said, her gaze sweeping over them. Judging by your complexions, you're all locals, aren't you? Have you never thought of ending this disaster and returning to the life you had before the Lion King arrived? Speaking of which, since you're stationed here, have you passed the Lion King's holy selection? If you can't, you'll just end up being killed by her anyway. Guinevere was deliberately painting a grim picture, but the threat she described was very real. The soldiers exchanged uncertain glances. Their resolve wavered completely when they witnessed Mash defeat several enforcement knights, who then vanished into thin air. They recalled Guinevere's widely rumored bold declarations. Are you truly going to correct the Lion King in the Holy City? One soldier finally asked. Call me ruler or king of knights, Guinevere declared. I promise you, I will correct her and set this world back on its proper course. The soldiers looked at each other, still feeling they would be betraying Agravain. Some even considered repaying his kindness with their lives. Your Majesty, King of Knights, please kill us, one said, his voice firm. Though we have never entered the Holy City, and are not knights, we received 3 months of training from Lord Agravain. We understand what loyalty means. All 30-odd soldiers bowed to Guinevere. If they had been spirits like the enforcement knights, killing them would have carried little psychological burden for her. But they were still living humans who had committed no great crime. Guinevere glanced aside as Mash, Ritsuka, and even 100 Faces gathered beside her. If Guinevere hadn't raised a hand to stop them, 100 Faces would have gladly granted their request. Guinevere was known for her cruelty, but she rarely killed the innocent and weak. Do you know of the Hossans? She asked. They are gathering warriors from across the land. Soon, they will join us in an assault on New Camelot City. She let out a small, cynical laugh. When they proposed this a couple of days ago, I told them we didn't need them. To us, ordinary soldiers are meaningless. But those gathered warriors insisted. They said they wanted to reclaim the Holy Land with their own hands and restore their homeland. Gentlemen, what do you think? In the small, cramped plaza within the fortress, the 30-odd soldiers wavered. They exchanged glances, each waiting for the first among them to surrender. Agravain had granted them the gift of survival, and they had pledged allegiance to New Camelot City to stay alive. But their faith remained rooted in their homeland. The mere mention of rekindling that faith made their own lives seem less important. If you could reclaim Jerusalem with your own hands, Guinevere added, your scriptures might one day record your names. It was true, ordinary soldiers were meaningless to Guinevere and her companions. She was simply offering these innocent people a chance to live. Seeing the soldiers' fervent passion and longing, Guinevere knew she had succeeded. She now understood the profound significance of having one's name recorded in the scriptures of their faith. Led by their captain, the 30-odd soldiers switched their allegiance, ready to fight once more for a cause they could believe in. 100 Faces removed her mask and offered them a sincere smile. Sharing the same faith, she accepted them without hesitation. All right, Guinevere said, you'll be in charge of their assignments from now on. As for food, Your Majesty, the King of Knights, the captain interrupted, if you can persuade the one in the dungeon, we won't lack for food. Ever since the enforcement knights captured him, he's been improving our meals every day. With the captain leading the way and the other soldiers sent to find a safe place to wait, Guinevere and her group descended into the dungeon. The floor was stained with blood, and torture instruments hung from the walls. After encountering a servant named Tawaratota and successfully forming an alliance with him, the group finally pushed open the door to the deepest cell. You. A voice trailed off from within. Your Majesty, the King of Knights, the soldier captain said, his expression fearful. The enforcement knights forbade us from coming here. Even when we served the Lion King, we could never have been so cruel to the Hassan who saved our comrades, especially since she's just a young girl. After the captain swore an oath to the one he now trusted, Guinevere decided to believe him. Inside the final cell, the floor was stained black with blood. Chained to the far wall hung a girl even smaller than Mash. Unlike the other Hassans, this one appeared much younger. Her white skull mask was missing its entire lower jaw, revealing small, slightly chapped cherry-red lips. Suspended as she was, her clothing was in disarray. The black strips of fabric, resembling a tattered evening gown, barely covered her body. Guinevere kicked the female captain out of the cell, ordering her to take Tawaratota, who was waiting outside, back to the surface. In the torchlight, Guinevere summoned golden flames and shot them at the steel chains suspending the girl in midair. The heat of the flames, or perhaps the presence of new arrivals, stirred the petite Hassan. Still barely conscious, she spoke. Who is it? Haven't you given up yet? No matter what you do, I won't talk. So just take my head already. The petite Hassan's voice was extremely weak. As the golden flames continued to burn through the iron chains, they also spread across her body. However, the flames were under Guinevere's control. They only incinerated the parasites festering in her wounds, providing initial treatment. Just as this preliminary care was complete, Guinevere's flames severed the arm-thick chains, and the petite Hassan fell from the wall. 100 Faces made no move to catch her. They knew the petite Hassan's entire body was poisonous, and dared not touch her, just as her enforcement knight torturers likely hadn't. Meanwhile, Guinevere secretly curled her lips into a smile. Mash, encumbered by her shield, couldn't step forward. Instead, the kind-hearted Ritsuka dashed forward and caught the girl perfectly. Only in that instant did 100 Faces remember he hadn't explained this Hassan of Serenity's ability. Zabaniya, delusional poison body. This was Hassan of Serenity's noble phantasm, her very essence. Her entire body was poison. Her skin, her mucous membranes, even a single drop of her bodily fluids was lethal. As Ritsuka held the dazed Hassan of Serenity, the assassin instinctively embraced her back, sealing Ritsuka's lips with her own and transferring her poisonous fluids. Heh, it's a little different from how I remember it, but the iconic scene still happened. Damn, I wish I had a phone to take a picture. Guinevere thought to herself. After the long kiss, Serenity finally regained her senses. She looked down at the girl in her arms, Ritsuka, who seemed dead but was merely overloaded, and then at the three others standing nearby, one of whom she recognized. In an instant, Serenity realized her instinctive counterattack had been a terrible mistake. Chapter 169, Was the Lion King truly correct? 1,395 words. Mash, what do you think? Feeling jealous? Jealous? What's that? Besides, if I got jealous every time, I'd have burned out long ago. Senpai is always like this. Exactly. This is just the prelude to a new romance. Inside the prison, Guinevere silently thought, thanks for the show. She was only disappointed that even with her prodding, Mash truly felt no jealousy. Even Dr. Romani, appearing via projection, wore an unfazed expression, as if this were nothing out of the ordinary. Wait, this is bad. This is no time to be savoring the moment. A powerful servant is on their way. Ritsuka, get up, now. From Chaldea, Dr. Romani's primary role was to monitor the battlefield and provide as much intelligence support as possible. His sudden outburst meant he had detected an approaching servant. Startled by his urgent warning, 100 Faces was the first to dash out, gesturing for Guinevere and the others to follow quickly. She had already noticed that Ritsuka, despite swallowing a lethal poison, hadn't died. In fact, her heartbeat was gradually stabilizing. Just as 100 Faces vanished, Serenity, still blaming herself for accidentally knocking off her mask, was caught off guard. The rebooted Ritsuka had regained her senses. She licked her lips lightly, took in Serenity's adorable appearance, and to the assassin's astonishment, kissed her back fiercely. Mash, still not jealous? I told you, I don't know what jealousy is. Right now, all I feel is pure, intense murderous intent toward Senpai. The enemy is almost here, and she's still doing this. I'd love to call this jealousy, Guinevere thought, but I dislike forcing emotional matters to a head. Besides, Mash's innocent expression brought a quiet delight to her heart. After all, Guinevere was the kind of person who could be summoned by Ryunosuke Uryu based on compatibility alone. That man was essentially a Kirai Kodomine, who had completely unleashed his desires. Anyway, thanks to the master servant contract and your shield, Ritsuka has poison resistance, right? Yes. Senpai even endured the poisonous fog of London. So, ruler, why are you blocking me? Let me go pull Senpai away. Ahem. I just thought this would be more amusing. When Guinevere's malicious side surfaced, it was truly wicked. She didn't know how potent London's fog was, nor how many other abilities Ritsuka had gained from her contract with Mash. She was simply curious whether Ritsuka had also inherited any abilities from her contract. Speaking of which, if Ritsuka gains abilities from every servant she contracts with, wouldn't she become the strongest of all once she has enough servants? And what do you think she inherited from me? Ahem. Ritsuka's aptitude as a mage is indeed excellent, but she can't possibly keep contracting indefinitely. But she is maintaining dozens of servant contracts, isn't she? Dr. Romani couldn't answer Guinevere's question. He could only scratch his head and say with a resigned sigh, perhaps this is the special nature of humanity's final master, chosen by the human order itself. To be fair, Guinevere and the others hadn't bothered to lower their voices. After a long, breathless kiss, Ritsuka helped Serenity to her feet. To make the normally healthy-skinned Hassan of Serenity blush so deeply. Ritsuka truly was something else. Mash, ruler, and Dr. Romani, I heard everything you just said, Ritsuka announced. The ability I inherited from ruler is probably an intense lust for cute girls. Mash's jaw dropped slightly, but she couldn't even bring herself to retort. Her senpai had always been like this, utterly powerless against girls of any type. In Mash's view, whatever Ritsuka had inherited from Guinevere, it definitely wasn't lust. But these personality traits were impossible to verify. And with the battle starting on the surface, it was no time to linger underground chatting. Ritsuka carried the heavily injured Hassan of Serenity, whose thoughts were now unreadable. Mash watched over them, staying a step behind. Guinevere, struck by an idea, had already returned to the surface, where she parried the swords of 2 enforcement knights with a single strike. It was indeed Agravain. The Hassan of the 100 Faces intelligence had been correct. But Agravain hadn't come alone. He had brought 200 enforcement knights with him. It hasn't been that long, Sir Agravain. Why do you still look like everyone owes you money? Clad in black hair and black armor, with a blue cloak trimmed in white fur, the helmetless knight's handsome face was marred by brows furrowed as sharply as blades. Queen, Agravain's voice was cold, do you not think it disrespectful to the king to wear his body while displaying such an unseemly smile? Being called queen again after so long caught Guinevere off guard. But Agravain didn't press the attack, and her momentary lapse was just that, a moment. After a moment, Guinevere's smile widened. She dismissed her armor and used her mana to conjure a modern outfit, one Leah would have loved. Hot pants, a jacket, and a baseball bat. A long ahogue poked out from the hole in a backward-worn baseball cap. This version of the King of Knights was clearly even less dignified. Sir Agravain, Guinevere's voice dripped with playful challenge, let me ask you, don't you want to see the king smile brightly, like an ordinary girl? In my world, your other self adored the king's smile. It was a deliberately dazzling smile, which then softened into a natural one. This smile from the King of Knights made Agravain clench his fists, and sent a wave of murmurs through the enforcement knights behind him. During this exchange, the Hassan of the 100 Faces and Tawaratota, who had been spared, moved to her side. The soldiers who had previously switched allegiances formed a defensive line, bracing themselves for a desperate battle. Sir Agravain, Guinevere continued, her tone mocking, you brought so many men. You must have intended to wipe us out in one fell swoop. So why haven't you attacked yet? Why are you still listening to my nonsense? Agravain's fists clenched and unclenched. He couldn't deny her question, and a faint pang of envy for his other self stirred within him. To see the king's smile every day. My other self has it far too good. With this thought weighing on his mind, Agravain listened to Guinevere's challenge, let out a long breath, and finally spoke. I didn't know it was you. I was merely here to spring the trap. Queen, please tell me, can you truly correct the Lion King? Hearing this, Guinevere froze again, unable to believe Agravain would utter words that sounded so close to treason. Of course, she replied, her confidence absolute. I have 100% faith in myself. Then prove it to me first. Even if I and every enforcement knight present were to fight together, we would not survive a single strike from the Lion King's spear. Agravain called her queen, and the ruler of New Camelot the Lion King. The implied disapproval was unmistakable. Until now, they had acted out of loyalty to their king, even if it meant abandoning all knightly honor. But things were different now. Tristan, so ashamed to face Guinevere that he had disfigured himself, Mordred, who had outright rebelled, Gawain, growing ever more somber, Lancelot, who had descended into madness once more. Guinevere's appearance had changed them all, causing them to harbor expectations they never thought they'd have for the one who was no longer the king they once knew. Deep down, they had all asked themselves, is the Lion King truly right? We were once the knights of the King of Knights. Now we are the knights of the Lion King. But if we could choose, we would still wish to be the knights of the King of Knights. Queen of the King of Knights, Your Highness Guinevere, I implore you. Prove to us, prove that you truly have the power to correct our king. For some reason, Agravain's tone was almost pleading. As his voice faded, the enforcement knights withdrew from the fortress, forming ranks on the barren plains. Agravain retreated with them, taking his place as their commander. By duty, he was not a knight who charged into the fray. But if necessary, he would not fail the name of Sir Agravain of Iron, one of the top 13 Round Table Knights and chief advisor to the King of Knights. Chapter 170, Guinevere, this is power stolen from a god. 1258 words. Senpai, are we really just going to watch? Mash, this is ruler's command. If we want to interfere, we'll have to oppose her. Night had fallen imperceptibly. Standing on the fortress's modest walls, Ritsuka and the others watched as Guinevere walked alone toward the 200 enforcement knights. They were tense and worried, knowing that the enforcement knights were all-night heroic spirits. A single 10-man squad of them would be more than Mash could handle alone. But what they didn't know was that in Guinevere's eyes, these 200 enforcement knights were nothing more than clay pigeons. A group of knights and a knight order were vastly different in her view. If this had been a true knight order, she would never have charged them, even without Agravain's command. They barely have a formation, and their attack sequence is rudimentary at best. That's all there is to it. The replica holy sword gleamed in Guinevere's hand. This time, to ensure an easy victory, she unhesitatingly activated judgment, condemning the enforcement knights for the crime of insubordination. The moment the skill activated, many enforcement knights dropped their weapons and knelt before Guinevere in repentance. Even Agravain's resolve wavered. But Agravain unleashed his mana, using his iron will to dispel the remorse in his heart. He immediately activated the enforcement knight's madness enhancement blessing, freeing them from the grip of guilt. Back then, the round table summoned by the Lion King had consisted of far more than just these few. Those whose desire to advise outweighed their loyalty had all been eliminated. Gareth herself had been killed by Agravain's own hand. For the enforcement knights, who were merely knights, the Lion King's methods were even cruder. She had granted them the madness enhancement blessing to ensure they would fight without hesitation when the time came. First squad, advance. At the command, the enforcement knights surged forward, their bodies cloaked in mana. As fellow knights, they simply lacked the prowess of the Round Table Knights but their swordsmanship. Guinevere knew it well. Because of this familiarity, she could defeat Tristan in 3 strikes, and overwhelm Lancelot and Gawain despite being at a disadvantage in attributes. Now facing the far weaker enforcement knights, Guinevere needed only one knight, one sword. Sir Agravain, you wish to witness my power, but you must first be capable of forcing it out of me. I imagine you want to see me surpass the strength I displayed against Gawain and Lancelot at the gates of New Camelot. Guinevere advanced with ease, each enforcement knight's weakness shining like a brilliant jewel in her eyes. Before long, a trail of corpses lay in her wake. When they knelt in repentance under her judgment, when they lost their will to madness enhancement, Guinevere granted them the release of death. She had heard their unspoken pleas, they had never wanted to tarnish their pride as knights. Soon, after cutting down 200 enforcement knights, Guinevere stood close enough to Agravain. The man known as Agravain of Iron, whose only flaw was his tendency to overwork, broke into a smile. My queen, he said, thank you for freeing those who never truly wished to serve. But now is when you must truly prove yourself. Among the Round Table Knights, Agravain was the one Guinevere had fought the least. He was always busy, so busy he never even had time for sparring in the training grounds. So Guinevere truly didn't know what Agravain's full power looked like. She swung her holy sword, severing the red mana chains that shot toward her. As Morgan's son, Agravain also possessed some knowledge of magecraft. Beyond the mana chains, he had infused his mana into the fallen enforcement knights, easily dyeing them black and manipulating them as puppets. Should she charge the puppeteer, seeking his death before her strength gave out? If he were an enemy she had to kill, Guinevere would have chosen this more efficient path. But Agravain merely wanted proof, even if he hadn't yet revealed what he would do once he received it. I know, Guinevere declared. Bathed in the Holy Lance's light, this world's Leah has become more akin to a god, her power far beyond what a mere servant could ever hope to match. But fortunately, I too possess the power of a god. Sir Agravain, I dislike wars of attrition. So allow me to prove myself to you now. Her second noble phantasm, my heart knows no god, my will is God's will. This noble phantasm granted Guinevere divinity, allowing her to briefly ascend into a god. This noble phantasm consumed an immense amount of mana, and Guinevere was uncertain of the extent of its enhancement. Yet, this did not diminish her resolve. After days of preparation, the mana she had stored within the replica holy sword finally allowed her to briefly release this noble phantasm. I am the god who blasphemes God, the voice that speaks for God's will. In her mortal life, Guinevere had ruthlessly purged the churches of Great Britain under the banner of the divine purification plan. Back then, she acted as God's representative. Whatever she declared, God was said to have declared. After all, God never contradicted her. When this feat sublimated into a noble phantasm, the divinity she gained was stolen from him, a sliver of his power now hers to wield. Wings unfurled from Guinevere's back, a pure white halo materialized above her head, and her eyes took on the detached indifference that should belong only to a god. This power, accumulated over 2 millennia across countless parallel worlds by the monotheistic god, nearly seized Guinevere's will the moment it manifested. However, this transformation originated from Guinevere herself, and her will was far from weak. As she began to resist, striving to make this borrowed power her own, her noble phantasm truly began to take effect. A second and then a third pair of wings unfurled as a tangible power began to truly coalesce in her grasp. Perhaps because this was stolen power, it was no longer the omnipotent pure white. Instead, it began to transform, aligning with the nature of Guinevere's noble phantasm. Ultimately, her second noble phantasm granted Guinevere A-rank divinity, seizing the power known as judgment. Its true name was Uriel. Tch. Guinevere clicked her tongue softly as she ascended into the sky, her angelic form leaving Agravain utterly speechless. Legend held that Uriel was the angel of God's light, flame, or wisdom. He was responsible for spreading God's radiance and also for governing the fires of hell. Typically, he wielded a flaming sword, inflicting torment upon the deeply sinful in hell. Another legend claimed that on the so-called Day of Final Judgment, it would be Uriel who opened the gates of hell to bring destruction upon the world. Beyond these legends, because Uriel was responsible for spreading God's light, which included true magic, alchemy, and astrology, he was severely condemned by the Church during the 8th century AD. So in the end you became my power. Then grant them rest, hellfire. The replica holy sword was engulfed in golden flames, which then began to turn black. As Guinevere swung the blade at the puppet-like enforcement knights, a power born from the void, truly from another dimension, instantly devoured them. When the divine halo faded, the golden light in her eyes receded, and the 3 pairs of wings dissolved into spiritrons, Guinevere had undeniably proven her strength. Even so, in Agravain's eyes, this power still paled in comparison to the Lion King wielding the holy lance. Chapter 171, Chapter 171, The Lion King's Royal Council. 1413 words. Sir Agravain, is this the result of your efforts? Yes. Using the promise of reassignment as bait and sacrificing 200 enforcement knights, I successfully probed the Queen's true capabilities. In the throne room of New Camelot City, the remaining 3 knights of the Round Table faced the magnificent Lion King. Her tone was flat, her gaze cold. Neither the deaths of the enforcement knights nor Agravain's findings stirred the slightest ripple on her expression. Sir Agravain, I only wish to know one thing. Have you located all the remaining villages of the mountain people? In this era, the Lion King had already unleashed numerous divine punishments. The craters dotting the entire wasteland were proof. Yet, until this moment, the Lion King had never sought to exterminate the mountain people. The Knights of the Round Table had never seriously pursued those who went into hiding. The reason for this was simple: what the Lion King needed most was time. She had to open the tower at the end of the world before the demon god king, who was incinerating the human order, could proceed to the next stage of his plan. Her true goal was to preserve the seeds of the world. Thus, when the Lion King suddenly inquired about the remaining villages of the mountain people, it signified, "My king, has your final preparation arrived? If so, there is no longer any need to eliminate the mountain people. Sir Gawain, You need only guard the gates of the holy city. The final ritual must not be disturbed. Gawaine's armor remained magnificent, but his face was weary. For days, he had stood guard at the gates, responsible for eliminating the useless population left behind after the holy selection. For a man whose nobility had inspired the archetype of the Prince Charming in later ages, the memory of the elderly, women, and children who had fallen to his sword was a fresh torment to his soul with each passing day. Yet, he still chose loyalty, recoiling even after answering, yes. Sir Agravain, give me the answer to my question. Yes, King. I have located most of the mountain people's hidden villages. I have agents planted among the civilians they are currently gathering. Very well. Let Sir Lancelot handle it. Did you not see through Guinevere's schemes, and judge her inferior to both me and Sir Lancelot? In this world's legends, it was the Holy Grail that sought out King Arthur and granted the entire Round Table Holy Communion. Now, the blessings the Lion King bestowed upon her Round Table knights originated from this legendary Holy Grail. When Tristan died and Mordred was banished, the Lion King reclaimed their gifts of inversion and rampage. She granted rampage to Lancelot, allowing him to unleash his noble phantasms in rapid succession at the cost of burning his soul. As for inversion, Lancelot also received it. This gift filled his heart with unwavering loyalty to the Lion King, purging his lust for women, and freeing him from the bonds of familial affection. Despite bearing these two additional blessings, Lancelot did not lose his sanity. King, to purge all the mountain people, including children no taller than a wagon wheel laid flat, is this truly your will? In his previous life, Agravain had died at Lancelot's hands, and the two were bitter enemies. Even now, serving under the Lion King, hearing her personally issue the order for a massacre. Lancelot, however, still believed the Lion King's transformation was not of her own volition. He clung to the idea that the massacre, the holy decree, all of it, was a false order issued by Agravain in the Lion King's name. But regardless of what Lancelot thought, when the Lion King met his gaze, her inhuman eyes burned an indelible mark into his soul. After a fierce internal struggle, the loyalty granted by inversion prevailed. He dropped to one knee and accepted the command without hesitation. Having done this, the Lion King slowly departed the throne room. She had a more important place to protect. Agravain, tell me, your story about transferring your allegiance, was it truly just bait? With the king gone, only Agravain and two others remained in the throne room. Lancelot lunged for Agravain's collar without a second thought, but Gawain intercepted his arm mid-reach. In his previous life, Gawain had failed to stop Lancelot from killing Agravain and Gareth. This time, he was determined not to let it happen again. Their armored arms clashed with a groan of metal. Lancelot finally regained his composure, only to hear Agravain speak. Humph. Who knows if it was bait? But I trust you remember the words of our fallen comrades, when the king strays from the path of chivalry, a knight's duty is not blind loyalty, but remonstrance. Agravain spoke with his usual scowl, as if the world owed him a debt. But as his words sank in, both Lancelot and Gawain frowned in disbelief. Agravain. I never thought I'd hear you say such a thing. The atmosphere in the throne room grew even colder. Ironically, it was now Lancelot who felt the urge to purge a traitor for the Lion King. It's because Guinevere has appeared, Agravain continued, and she's using the body of another king of knights. She represents the king's own will to correct her mistakes. Lancelot, tell me, should I remain loyal to the ideal king of knights, or to this Lion King who has betrayed the path of chivalry? Guinevere's appearance alone didn't surprise Agravain. But Guinevere inhabiting the body of the king of knights, that was what truly astonished him. He had always been the king of knights' most loyal knight, his heart set on helping her build a prosperous kingdom. But that loyalty was predicated on his king being the king of knights, the ideal ruler in his heart. The king's desire to correct herself was the root of his confusion and wavering. Agravain, Gawain asked, will you betray her, then? No. I have already sworn an oath. This time, I will stay with the king until the very end. Even if she has fallen from the king of knights to the Lion King, her ideals remain untainted. If no knight is willing to stand by her until the end, then the tragedy is ours alone. Does ruler know of your decision? Lancelot asked hesitantly. After I acknowledged her proof, I told her I would not betray the Lion King. She was stunned for a moment. Then she personally cooked a barbecue, and invited me to eat with her. As he spoke, Agravain, who usually wore a perpetual scowl, actually smiled. He remembered the King of Knights cooking with a cheerful grin, happily serving meat to him, and the other ordinary soldiers who had switched their allegiance. With a Guinevere like this by her side, the King of Knights from the other world would never have tolerated your covetous gaze upon her. And Tristan wouldn't have constantly complained that the king doesn't understand the human heart. This was Agravain's assessment, a judgment that made Lancelot both envious and sigh in resignation. Lancelot, Agravain asked, are you still seeking the king's judgment? Before that, I too will stand by the Lion King until the very end. Is that so? Then begin your cleanup here. In the initial stages, it would be best for you to avoid confronting Guinevere. Agravain's honest assessment was that Guinevere was not as powerful as the Lion King. However, the claim that she was weaker than Lancelot was a request from Guinevere herself. Agravain knew exactly what Guinevere was scheming. Guinevere, in turn, knew perfectly well that Agravain would become her enemy again once he returned to the Lion King's side. Yet she still made the request, and Agravain reported it to the Lion King exactly as she'd asked. He remained here, still willing to offer his life to the Lion King. But a crack had formed in his loyalty, a small opening where he now hoped for correction from Guinevere. The king's wish. Guinevere had assured him that Chaldea would reclaim humanity's future, utterly defeating the king of magecraft, after repairing the remaining singularities. Lancelot, Agravain had said, you need not relay my words to the king. Her eyes have already seen through everything, yet she remains unshaken, with no intention of dealing with me. Therefore, even as I hope for the king's correction, I will not betray my loyalty. I will fight meticulously to the very last moment. Chapter 172, Chapter 172, King Hassan's Condition for Intervention. 1383 words. Ruler, Ritsuka asked Guinevere, do you really think Agravain will pass on your message? Will he truly side with us? It was the next day, and they were back in the East Village. Overnight, thanks to Tawaratota's noble phantasm that could produce endless rice, the villagers had finally enjoyed a meal that wasn't monster meat. The night had turned into a feast. Tawaratota was repeatedly tossed into the air in celebration, and some of the mountain people's young women even offered to share their beds with him. After the night of revelry, Guinevere stood at the highest point in the village, gazing toward New Camelot City. She had Agravain claim her strength was inferior to Lancelot's simply to lure him out and kill him. She didn't care where Lancelot began his mission. Since their arrival, the Hossans had been preparing for the final battle. Throughout this singularity, mountain people were continuously guided to the various Hossan villages. Under these circumstances, the locations of these villages would inevitably be discovered by New Camelot City. In my view, Guinevere continued, whether the Lion King attacks depends entirely on her whim, and whether she has knights under her command who are unafraid of my threat. Are you saying the Lion King has finally decided to act? Ritsuka asked. Thanks to her past life memories, Guinevere knew the Lion King would eventually move against the mountain people, she just wasn't sure when. Her primary motivation for luring Lancelot out was Mash. After realizing the depth of her rage toward Lancelot, Mash had insisted on challenging him to a one-on-one duel, even though she had no confidence in winning. Ritsuka, Guinevere said, changing the subject, let's put that aside for now. What are your thoughts on the message Hassan of Intoxicated Smoke brought back at the cost of his life? Several days earlier, after Hassan of Intoxicated Smoke had returned to the East Village with both arms severed, Guinevere had taken on the task of seeking aid from the first Hassan. Also last night, Hassan of the Cursed Arm found himself facing Hassan of Intoxicated Smoke's bloody mask, and a farewell letter written in his own hand. Only then did Guinevere recall some of the first Hassan's rules, and only then did Ritsuka and the others understand that Hassan of Intoxicated Smoke had gambled with his life. My blade is the death of the old man, my blade is the judgment of the old man. This was the first Hassan's creed, which Cursed Arm recited after reading the letter. He is the old man of the mountain among the old men of the mountain, the one who slays the old men of the mountain. When a successor Hassan becomes corrupt, falls from grace, or strays from their path, he appears before them to pronounce their death. By the same token, when an old man of the mountain seeks his aid, it signifies that the petitioner is unworthy of the title. He will strip them of their mask and sever their head. However, Lord First Hassan is not without compassion. Hassan of Intoxicated Smoke secured his promise to intervene, and also obtained intelligence that will be of immense help to our cause. In the letter, Hassan of Intoxicated Smoke mentioned the Atlas Institute, claiming it held the key to the Lion King's true intentions, the flaw in the human order, and the origin of everything. He also wrote that once Chaldea grasped this truth, his blade would lead the charge in battle, and he would bring death to the Knight of the Sun who had slaughtered countless mountain people. The Atlas Institute, located within the Sun King's desert, remained a domain even the Sun King himself could not touch. The whisper of the wind, the sound of laughter, and the clash of weapons from morning training, as the sun climbed higher, these sounds began to fill the ears of the two conversing. The matter of the Atlas Institute was the top priority, whether to secure First Hassan's aid, or to uncover intelligence on the Lion King's true intentions. However, following the battle the night before last and Agravain's report of Guinevere's words, they had to be constantly prepared for an attack from Lancelot. Ruler. Mash Da Vinci-chan, and I will go, Ritsuka said. If Lancelot intercepts us, I'll summon you immediately. Guinevere had also wanted to see the Atlas Institute. It was a mage organization founded before the Common Era, a mystery even older than the clock tower she was connected to. From her memories, the Atlas Institute primarily housed alchemists, who had been forging weapons to avert the end of the world. Legend claimed their arsenal had long surpassed the current era's technology, weapons that could save the world or destroy it. All right, Guinevere sighed, setting aside her curiosity and accepting Ritsuka's decision. I'll stay behind to guard against Lancelot. After all, she was the one who had set the trap for Lancelot, and she alone was the decisive weapon capable of hunting him down. Mash was confident and eager for a duel, but leaving her behind would only make everyone uneasy. But since I'm the one staying behind, Guinevere said, you don't need to leave anyone else with me. Take Bedivere, Tawara Tota, and Hassan of Serenity with you. She paused, a teasing glint in her eyes. Speaking of which, Hassan of Serenity invited you, didn't she? Why didn't you go to her room? Ruler, don't joke about that, Ritsuka replied, flustered. Her first kiss was an attempt to kill me, and my kiss back was retaliation. We've only just met. How could I possibly jump straight to deeply replenishing magic with her? She added, besides, her feelings for me aren't romantic. She's just never met a human who could withstand her poison before. Oh? So you do have some self-control after all, Guinevere chuckled. It seems you didn't inherit my lecherous side. Guinevere was only teasing. As smoke began to rise from the chimneys, the residents of the East Village started preparing breakfast. With their plan set, Ritsuka's team would depart for the desert after the meal. Ritsuka, we still have some time, Guinevere said. Why not use it for some night training? I can teach you a few techniques, at the very least. Ruler, please do. Ritsuka Fujimura was a diligent girl, always seizing any opportunity to grow stronger. The moment she agreed, her body began to experience the painful blows of Guinevere's replica holy sword. Guinevere used the flat of her blade, teaching Ritsuka the swordsmanship techniques she had honed herself. I can't speak for other opponents, Guinevere said, but as long as you master these 3 strikes and your base stats aren't too far behind, then against any knight of Camelot, you'll be able to last at least 3 strikes before you die. Huh? Hey! Shouldn't it be defeating them in 3 strikes? Ritsuka protested. Hey, don't get your hopes up, Guinevere scoffed. Do you think I rely solely on swordsmanship? And do you really believe a knight of Camelot can be killed by an ordinary person in just 3 strikes? Then, ruler, could you teach these 3 strikes to the mountain people's warriors and the soldiers who've joined us? With these techniques, Ritsuka, you truly are a good person. The glint of swords flashed across the East Village's central drying ground. More and more people gathered to watch. Among them, Mash and Serenity winced in sympathy for Ritsuka, while most were simply enjoying the spectacle. But when Ritsuka made her request, the expressions of the onlookers changed instantly. Several immediately bowed their heads to her in respect. Of course, after thanking Ritsuka, they didn't forget to thank Guinevere, the master instructor. "Hey, don't push your luck," Guinevere exclaimed. "If you all start calling me master, I'll have to teach you even more, won't I?" Despite her words, Guinevere also wanted more of the mountain people to survive. This, too, would help atone for the Lion King's sins. "Alright, enough dithering. For now, let's eat. After the meal, I will train you using the fastest and most brutal methods." Her golden hair shone in the sunlight. In her long blue dress, the King of Knights truly commanded the respect of a monarch, compelling all to bow. Chapter 173, The Great Hero, Arash. 1378 words. 1-2. Relax. Don't tense your bodies so much. How many times do I have to tell you to move naturally? 3-4. I told you, don't let fear rule your hearts. Don't instinctively look away when a blade comes at you. The more you fear, the less likely you are to survive. 5-6. What? Getting angry already? Thinking of giving up? Then get out of the village, and don't even think about eating later. On the East Village's drying ground, over 100 people stood in formation, practicing their swordplay. Besides teaching them basic swordsmanship, Guinevere had organized them into 3-person squads, each member learning a different set of techniques. Time was short, and the task was immense. Guinevere could only hope they would learn to complement and support one another. She also implemented training drills from her time training the Knight Order, demanding they memorize commands and strive for perfect discipline, acting instantly and ceasing on command. As for the overall command of the mountain people, Guinevere entrusted it to Hassan of the 100 Faces. "Miss Ruler, it would be better if you led everyone. We are merely assassins. TCH. If you won't take command, am I supposed to expect you to charge into the fray? In terms of individual combat strength, you can't even defeat a single enforcement knight. But if you take command, your ability to split yourself can be fully utilized." Dozens of eyes scattered across the battlefield, sharing real-time intelligence. That's an unparalleled advantage in this era. "Miss 100 Faces, I have only one question for you. Are you willing to give your all to ensure that more people survive? And remember, my ultimate goal is to confront the Lion King face to face." 100 Faces had asked her question in front of everyone, and Guinevere had answered just as publicly. After her speech, the various bodies of 100 Faces could be seen huddled together, studying the battlefield command regulations Guinevere had hastily written. Impressive. Not only did you leave 100 Faces speechless, but you also demonstrated your ability to recognize and utilize talent, boosting the confidence of a self-doubting servant. "Your Grace Arash, you flatter me." A smile touched Guinevere's lips. After Ritsuka had departed with most of the servants, only Guinevere, Cursed Arm, 100 Faces, and Arash remained in the East Village. Once Guinevere finished teaching the training methods, Cursed Arm took over supervising the repetitive drills. With 100 Faces now occupied, only the temporarily idle Arash was free to speak with her. "Lord Arash, let me confirm one last time. Even if the most distant village is attacked, can you throw me there in time to help? Miss Ruler, please have more faith in my arm's strength." This so-called downtime was merely a state of readiness, ensuring Arash could respond to any threat at a moment's notice. As a hero famed for firing an arrow over 2,500 kilometers, his range was sufficient to cover the entire singularity. Yes, this singularity had borders. Guinevere knew this from her past life, and she had proven it to everyone. She had asked Arash to demonstrate the limits of his archery by firing an arrow to the farthest possible point. The result confirmed her theory. The purpose of this demonstration was to crush any remaining resistance among the mountain people against attacking New Camelot City. For the people of this singularity, there were only two paths to survival: journey to New Camelot to undergo the holy selection, or be fortunate enough to receive the mountain people's protection. Beyond these, the only other option was to cross the vast desert into the world beyond, even though no one who had ventured there since New Camelot's descent had ever returned alive. The conclusion that the world had an end utterly shattered the mountain people's last vestiges of hope, forcing them to understand, if New Camelot City began a systematic purge, their only option would be to fight back. Lord Arash, let's run a scenario. If you were a Round Table Knight tasked with carrying out this purge, which village would you start with? In this era, the mountain people lacked paper, but there was no shortage of sand. Guinevere had constructed a sand map several square meters in size, recreating the entire Singularity's terrain based on everything she had seen and heard. She meticulously marked New Camelot City, the Sun King's Desert, the rolling mountain ranges, and the hidden mountain people settlements nestled within them. In response to Guinevere's question, the great Persian hero materialized an arrow. Starting from the sandcastle representing New Camelot, he drew over 30 parallel lines across the map. My homeland's warfare isn't suited for nightly combat, he explained. Victory is all that matters, so I always prepare for the worst-case scenario. The parallel lines, combined with his words, made Guinevere understand Arash's thinking. She recalled how vulnerable most of the villages were. Even with other Hassans protecting them, they couldn't possibly fend off even a small squad of enforcement knights. So you're saying New Camelot City wouldn't even need a Round Table Knight to lead the purge? Then why did you agree to my plan? Miss Ruler, you really enjoy playing dumb sometimes, Arash chuckled. There's no way you didn't consider this possibility. You're the one who devised this entire scheme. Playing dumb? What do you mean? Ha ha ha, well, if you insist. For instance, you sent all the other servants with Ritsuka but deliberately kept me here, saying I'd be useful. Surely you don't just need me for battlefield delivery, right? Besides, didn't you say you were summoned by the Magus Merlin? He must have told you a few things. After all, his most famous talent is prophecy. To a clever mind, any action reveals its true purpose. But even the cleverest minds have limited information, and their conclusions can still be flawed. Watching Arash's cheerful, confident expression, Guinevere didn't mind letting Merlin take the blame. Pfft. You're right, Merlin did mention a few things, she admitted. He also said that if too many people know a prophecy, it's very likely to change. Miss Ruler, I understand your concerns. But since you've chosen to trust me, then trust me more. As long as the targets aren't Round Table Knights, I can stand here and snipe the enforcement knights heading for the villages one by one. In doing so, I'll also pinpoint the location of the Round Table Knight you're trying to lure out. Arash hadn't misunderstood the combat situation. If New Camelot City truly adopted this strategy, Guinevere's only hope would be his long-range sniping. But he had completely misunderstood the matter of trust. As someone who knew how useful he was from her past life, Guinevere wouldn't hesitate to trust him. Just as they reached this consensus, 100 Faces, who had been collectively meditating, suddenly froze. One of her personas stationed near New Camelot City had sent a message. Lancelot and over 500 enforcement knights were on the move. And that was the persona's final report. Arash, I'm counting on you. Upon receiving the news, Guinevere and Arash climbed to the highest peak of the mountain. But as she watched him activate his clairvoyance and focus solely on the distant horizon, Guinevere couldn't help but add. If you stay here and keep killing, what awaits you in the end will be the Lion King's divine punishment. Miss Ruler, people always die in war. You don't need to feel sorry. And I can promise you, if the Lion King's divine punishment comes, I will shoot it down. I will prove to everyone that even if the Lion King has become a god, she is not invincible. Arash was still smiling cheerfully. From the moment he'd sent Ritsuka and the others ahead to save time, from the moment he'd realized why Guinevere had specifically kept him behind, he had foreseen the outcome of this mission. He had foreseen Guinevere's guilt and her decision to sacrifice him. But he embraced it willingly. He would offer his entire life to protect the people of this land. Understanding his resolve, Guinevere said no more. She took a deep breath to compose herself, preparing for the impending duel with Lancelot. This time, she still believed she could win. Chapter 174, Chapter 174, Lancelot, I declare you guilty. 1259 words. Robust physique, EX, clairvoyance, A, arrow creation, A. With just these three skills and his own unparalleled archery, Arash could continuously snipe the enforcement knights advancing along separate routes, as he fired from the high mountain peak down into the wilderness below. His arrows streaked like shooting stars, like meteors, like beams of seven-colored light. Spanning tens of kilometers, they relentlessly struck the enforcement knights from their horses, sowing panic among those who had betrayed the way of the night. 1 arrow, 10 arrows, 100 arrows, as long as he didn't use his noble phantasm, Arash seemed capable of firing indefinitely. Only the bow in his hands and the arrows he created with his arrow creation skill could withstand the strain of his robust physique. Ruler, I think I've found him. My arrows aimed toward the west village are being shot down, and that rider is wearing different armor. Arash, I'm counting on you. In her memories of this singularity from her past life, Arash had once thrown Mash, Ritsuka, and the others over tens of kilometers, using that dining table as a makeshift boat. This time, with Mash absent, Guinevere used the second wooden flying chariot crafted by Da Vinci Chan. As Arash lifted the wooden flying chariot, the muscles in his arms bulged with power. The chariot, with Guinevere inside, shot into the sky like a cannonball. Before long, however, the wooden flying chariot began to buckle under the strain of its sound barrier-breaking speed. The sails on its sides and other components started to disintegrate, until only the main body remained, carrying Guinevere as it plummeted toward the west village. The force of the sonic boom caused Guinevere to black out for several seconds. Upon regaining consciousness, she instinctively crouched low, letting the chariot bear the brunt of the obstructive wind. This method of travel. Even some weaker servants probably couldn't endure it. Because he was launching a person instead of an arrow, Arash had carefully controlled his strength. He had ensured the chariot's thrust would begin to fail halfway through its flight, allowing it to coast toward the target on inertia alone. This reduced speed allowed Guinevere to straighten up, muttering to herself as she scanned her surroundings. In the sky, 7 colored streaks of light continued to shoot across the heavens, overtaking the chariot and carrying Arash's fury to the enforcement knights. Looking down, Guinevere saw the scattered enforcement knights. Only Lancelot remained in his original position. He looked the same as he had a few days ago, but his aura was significantly stronger. Second noble phantasm, instant release. Having used it once before, she was much more accustomed to it the second time. Wings materialized on Guinevere's back, lifting her from the wooden flying chariot. In the same instant, she kicked the chariot hard. The blow altered its trajectory, sending the self-destructing magecraft creation plummeting straight toward Lancelot. According to Da Vinci Chan herself, the explosion from her creation packed 1/10 of the power of a holy sword beam. Boom! A deafening roar erupted, blasting sand and earth into the air and completely obscuring Lancelot's figure. But as the saying goes, where there's smoke, there's no harm. Lancelot cleaved through the dust cloud with a single sword strike, revealing himself and his steed completely unscathed. Guinevere's second attack followed immediately, another sword of destined judgment hurtling toward him. This time, the crimson light descended like a celestial river. And this time, Lancelot shattered Guinevere's noble phantasm with his sword, the afterglow erupting in towering pillars of light on either side of him. However, these two attacks had cost Lancelot the opportunity to strike while Guinevere was off balance. Her wings dissipated, and she landed steadily a short distance in front of him. Guinevere had defeated Lancelot in life and sparred with him again during the Fourth Holy Grail War. Based on her recent clash with this Lancelot before the gates of New Camelot, she had judged him to be stronger than the Lancelot she knew in life, yet weaker than Fairy Knight Lancelot. However, that conclusion was from their spar several days ago. Now, as they faced each other in silence, she saw no trace of his former hesitation, only a bone-chilling killing intent. Is this the inversion blessing Agravain mentioned? Guinevere wondered even as their swords clashed. She held nothing back, but Lancelot's blade was saturated with murderous intent. With each swing, his sword seemed to grow darker, as if being stained by its master's actions. It was as if Lancelot had betrayed the very principles his sword once embodied. Guinevere was witnessing firsthand the transformation of a Rondite from a holy sword into a demonic sword. I declare you guilty of betraying your king, conspiring with his wife, and committing the crime of disloyalty. I declare you guilty of neglecting your wife, abandoning your child, and failing in your duties as a father. I declare you guilty of abandoning the knight's code by aiding a tyrant instead of counseling your king. As Guinevere relentlessly cast her judgment upon him, his soul was tormented by the skill's effect. Tears streamed down his face, yet amidst his weeping, he burst into unrestrained, joyous laughter. After all, Guinevere was using the king of knights' body, and acting with her trust. To be judged by Guinevere was to be judged by the king of knights herself. This was the wish Lancelot had yearned for decades in life, a desire that had become a lingering obsession even after death. He lowered his sword and stepped back, wiping away his tears. Then, he looked at Guinevere and said, "Thank you. And, ruler, since you have passed judgment upon me, come now and execute this sinner." As Lancelot's voice fell, the transformation of a Rondite in his hand accelerated, turning it into a demonic sword. A familiar, frenzied madness began to taint his mana signature, a madness Guinevere recognized. In effect, judgment allowed Guinevere to deal increased damage to Lancelot. However, the mental torment it inflicted had paradoxically become a powerful buff for him. His guilt, under the effect of inversion, transformed into pure, unadulterated killing intent. Snap. It was the snap of her fingers, and a mass of golden flames instantly enveloped Lancelot. But even in his frenzy, his class was still saber. His magic resistance B, combined with the protection of the Lady of the Lake, was enough to let him ignore this mere probing flame. However, Guinevere's execution was EX rank. As she continuously raised the flame's temperature to around 1,000 degrees, Lancelot was forced to use mana burst to disperse the fire clinging to him. Of course, this mana burst wasn't a skill but a technique Lancelot had mastered. It consumed more mana, and was less effective than the actual skill. But, since Guinevere didn't intend to burn him to death, preferring to cut him down herself, Lancelot's mana burst was more than sufficient. Originally, I planned to let Mash beat you senseless. But since it's you, I can't afford to hold back in a sword fight. Lancelot, if you want to apologize to the Galahad within Mash, then you'd better fight harder. Hold out until she can get here. Swords clashed and the wasteland cracked. Barring any surprises, Lancelot would be cut down by Guinevere right here. Inversion, rampage, and the ferocity he originally possessed had nothing to do with his swordsmanship, which had already reached its absolute limit. Ferocity merely granted him immunity to all debuffs, effectively making him a ruler-class servant. Guinevere's judgment interrogation, however, was not classified as a debuff. Chapter 175, Chapter 175, Lion King, you have betrayed your former self. 1,276 words. Rewinding time to earlier this morning, after Mash, Ritsuka, and the others had set out. Thanks to their formidable combat strength and Da Vinci-chan's vehicle, they reached the Sun King's desert quickly and smoothly. Once there, it didn't take them long to find the singularity within the desert. It was marked by a massive gathering of sphinxes, guarded by Nitocris herself. After a brief conversation, and a hint of jealousy from Nitocris toward Serenity, who was clinging to Ritsuka's back, Nitocris commanded the sphinxes to clear a path. She then invited them to visit the Sun King's tomb, after they finished exploring the underground facility. Upon reaching the underground, they found the Atlas Institute deserted, save for Holmes. He had been waiting there as a rogue servant, anticipating Chaldea's arrival. From the data stored in the Atlas Institute, the Chaldea team learned about the 2004 Holy Grail War. They discovered that the victor was the director before the last, and that Dr. Romani had been specially recruited into Chaldea afterward. They also learned. So, the reason this singularity exists is because the Lion King's holy lance truly did sever this world from human history. You already knew. She is Guinevere, and she inhabits the body of the King of Knights. We have no doubt she possesses knowledge of secrets unknown even to us Round Table Knights. The Holy Lance Rhongomyniad is a projection of the tower at the end of the world. This tower serves as an anchor, preventing the planet's surface layer from detaching from the planet itself. The Queen mentioned that in her world, she formed many connections with the clock tower, and gained a considerable understanding of the world's surface and reverse sides. In the deepest level of the Atlas Institute, a vast space with a false sky, housing the Spiritron calculation engine, Trismegistus, Bedivere's words slightly surprised Holmes. But even if the Chaldea team already knew this, it merely saved him the trouble of explaining. Do you know that New Camelot City in this singularity is the Holy Lance itself? Guinevere seemed to know a great deal. After all, she had been summoned by Merlin specifically to support this singularity. However, ever since being asked to let Mash figure out the true name of the servant within her on her own, Guinevere had adopted a policy of less talk, more action. In hindsight, her request for Arash to shoot his arrow farther, revealing the singularity's boundary, wasn't about witnessing his skill. It was merely a pretext to reveal that piece of information. If she was so hesitant even about that, it was no surprise she had never told them that New Camelot City was the Holy Lance. But like Arash, they had misunderstood. This information wasn't something Merlin had forbidden her from revealing due to some prophecy or rule. Guinevere chose to keep it secret, revealing only small fragments as events unfolded, simply because she had suffered for it before. She didn't want to deceive people again by claiming she could see the future. Besides, Guinevere knew they would find out eventually. Back at the Atlas Institute, Holmes dropped a bombshell. The Chaldea members exchanged uneasy glances, now more curious about the Lion King's true purpose in gathering the Holy Selected within the tower at the end. Based on my observations of the Holy Selected, Holmes explained, the Lion King chooses those who will always do what is right, no matter the circumstances. According to Hermes' calculations, the Holy Lance can only contain the souls of 500 people. At this rate, the Holy Lance has fewer than 20 spots remaining. Hearing this, the Chaldea group understood why the Lion King had only granted the Holy Grail to 2 or 3 individuals out of 1,000 refugees. The Lance's capacity forced her to be ruthlessly selective. They also realized that Guinevere was likely about to lure Lancelot in. According to her, the Lion King had dispatched Lancelot to purge various regions, a clear sign that New Camelot City's preparations were entering their final stage. Mr. Holmes, if that's the case, please speak faster. We're running out of time. Through her master-servant contract, Ritsuka knew that Guinevere and Arash were still waiting on the highest peak of the East Village. But outside New Camelot City, the enforcement knights were already assembling and dividing their forces. Then speak. What else do you want to ask? The beginning of everything was already clear. The Holy Grail War of 2004, involving the director before the last. But the hidden secrets within still required further investigation. A flaw in the human order. The concept was too vast, too abstract. But Holmes had prompted Ritsuka to consider why the King of Magecraft chose to retroactively incinerate the human order starting from 2016. Was it possible that human history after 2016 was already a blank slate? Having come this far, Chaldea had only one of the 3 questions left, the questions that could compel the first Hassan to act. Tell us the Lion King's true purpose. Ha! The answer I can give is merely my own deduction, which may still be some distance from the truth. Do you still wish to hear it? Yes. For most, a deduction from the great detective Holmes was as good as the truth itself. Then, according to my deduction, the Lion King is having the Holy Selected enter the Holy Lands not to protect them, but to prevent them from ever escaping. Extrapolating further, the Holy Lands will one day contract back into the Lion King's hand. At that moment, there will be no room for life within it. All the Holy Selected will become nothing more than specimens in the Lion King's collection. In this way, even after the incineration of human order is complete, the Lion King can still preserve a few human specimens at the end of the world. Given the King of Night's original noble character, if she had despaired of ever defeating the incineration of human order, this is likely the path she would have chosen, wouldn't you agree? Of course, such a choice would also mean she has accepted the incineration of human order and abandoned all humanity except for her chosen specimens. Guinevere, Galahad, you were both among the King of Night's most important Round Table knights. What are your thoughts? At that moment, the Chaldean party had their answer. As for the two Holmes had questioned. Rage surged within Mash. She wanted nothing more than to smash the Lion King off her throne with her shield, grab her by the collar, and demand an explanation. And Guinevere? He subconsciously touched his silver arm, his heart filled with self-loathing. Once again, he blamed himself for failing to return the holy sword. He believed this failure was the reason the King of Knights could not find peace, instead wandering the world for centuries until she became this malevolent goddess. I still remember why the king pulled the sword from the stone. She cast aside her humanity to become king for the stability of Great Britain and the happiness of its people, shouldering the weight of millions of lives on her slender shoulders. And you're telling me the king compromised? That she's now fighting only for 500 specimens? What kind of joke is this? Guinevere, I'm not joking. This is my deduction. If you wish to deny it, then go and prove it yourself. Rage, regret, and a storm of other emotions clawed at Guinevere's heart. But there was no time to calm himself. According to a message from Guinevere through their master-servant contract, Arash had already begun sniping the enforcement knights in the detached unit. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Novels Wonderland.